He strolls through the corridors, and no one can ignore bro's aura. They keep asking themselves, is it him, the Chad faker? Yes, it's the famous Grandmaster. Suho Kong, the school's prodigy. Everyone wants to suck up to bro, and the praises keep coming non-stop. Lil Wigga loves all of it. Even Juri Yun, the school queen and support player, can't help it and feels like she needs a change of panties. She wants to play some tough matches with him and gets closer, but he's just farming hands in his pockets. He tries to get free, saying he doesn't have time to play with her. But she gets angry, shouting that he should carry her because she's cute, funny, and even reach master rank. But he just smiles and says that if she's so good, why does she want to get so close and comfy beside him? Does she want to get carried by a true pro? He leaves while the simps say they would love to be with her for real. A while later, he's in class board when he suddenly stands up and makes a fake-ass excuse, asking to go to the nurse, but on the way, he changes paths. Then he goes to practice for the upcoming Tori on the school's PCs. When suddenly someone else does the same, a black-haired kid is playing there, too. He calls bro, and they agree not to snitch on each other. But when the blonde boy sees that the dude is playing the same game, he gets an idea. Even though he's using a trash mouse, he calls the new kid to a 1v1. Seeing the boy's character is a complete starter. He's sure it's going to be easy, and the 1v1 starts. Soon enough, it's already 100 and the boy logs out. But it's the blonde boy who lost 10 times. He was completely annihilated and has no idea how the boy was unranked and using starter equipment, so this shouldn't be possible. He's a grandmaster, so this definitely isn't someone random. He searches his nickname and discovers the truth. This little random kid is actually legend rank, the highest possible. Worst of all, he barely plays the game and also plays on the American server with insanely high ping. And of course, he's our MC. Unfortunately for the new kid, the blonde boy is now in love. Down tries to go home secretly, but Blondie is there waiting for him. After a lot of insistence and with no options because this dude really wants to play, they're now at a PC cafe, and Down has never played with such good PC settings before when suddenly a thirsty girl appears. And from our MC's face, it's clear he wants some of that booty, but she's more interested in the blonde boy since she thinks he's the better player for now, even trash-talking him when she sees a level 22 on the team. Blondie tells her to believe in it, and they all log into the game. Juri is a master rank support. Kong is a grandmaster DPS, while our Ligma is just a random beginner. The match starts. It's to League of Legends. Our boy is just there gazing at the high-end graphics and enjoying everything. It's a quick match, so everyone rushes. Kong leaps forward, charges a punch, and gets the first kill. Some enemies target Juri to kill the support, and it's the moment for our boy to shine. But he's playing like a complete idiot. That's because all the shortcuts on his mouse and keyboard are different. Now that he realizes it, he decides to focus. But we don't see the result because the scene changes to the next day in class. When Du Yun is talking to Kong about two friends he used to play with, a girl gets surprised upon seeing him. Lil Babe even gets hiccups just from seeing our boy. I bet 100K she's the one who used to secretly play with our bro. He's already back home when Kong invites him to play in a tournament so he can get some money to buy a better PC. And in the comments, everyone below master level was feeling pretty down. That's why the event organizers started to realize how solid the plan was. Since the best players in the world were signing up, it could be a massive hit. They were talking about a competition packed with big names and respected players. But two of those players were in trouble because Soon Duyan, who would team up with Suwa, was unlucky enough to land in platinum ranking. This competition was set up by the streamer Suabot 9000. The goal was for the main character to join in. Even though it was still an official tournament, this was the first one in Korea. Duyan, for his part, wasn't super confident, but the prize was $1,000 for the winning team. With the split, it would be about 200 each, which would be enough for Duyan to upgrade his mouse and keyboard. That was the prize for the winner, meaning they had to win. For Suwa, it's practically an insult that the main character thinks they won't. He confidently says that the day before it was the computer holding the kid back and that they will win. So with this confidence in him, Duan got hyped to play, ready to give it his all. To register, they needed a minimum rank of master. So it was decided that the kid should play some ranked matches. And maybe because everyone was hyping him up, Duan was already picturing that shiny prize in his hands. Later on, back at Sua's place, while scrolling through his phone, he saw a message from Juri inviting him to catch a movie on Saturday and maybe play C-Bond after. But the boy tossed his phone aside, fed up with her constant invites. Still, he thought it'd be cool if Duan had already hit that rank. Suvo was super curious about how many matches the main dude had won and was convinced he'd at least made it to master rank. But in the now, the platinum emblem was shown to the blonde, and he felt super embarrassed. And while shaking with fear of getting roasted, Duan heard Sua shout. Later that day, the main dude was looking pretty down. Sua tried to cheer him up, saying ranked matches were just like that, and they could still level up by the weekend. He said it was weird, but Duyan should totally be able to rank up without breaking a sweat. But then he found out the boy had 5 wins and 5 losses. At that moment, Sua couldn't even look Duyan in the eyes anymore. But instead of feeling bummed out about losing his confidence, Duan decided to grind every day until he nailed it, hoping not to let Suwa down. So a long night of epic gaming went by, and the next day, the friends were hit with an even bigger surprise. Because after playing a bunch of matches, the main dude got demoted to gold rank. While Juri was laughing her head off, Sugo was trying to figure out what went wrong. The reality was they only had 4 days until registration closed, and if this kept up, they wouldn't even get in, let alone win. So, the main dude felt as low as possible, but Suwa didn't seem much better. In general, Korean players are usually better than most, which raises the server level. But in FPS games, it's a whole different ball game since Western players really stand out. Because clears throat. Of that, Suwa couldn't wrap his head around why the main dude was struggling against less experienced players. And he couldn't help but think the boy might be a hacker. But he shook that thought off, not wanting to judge, just trying to figure out how this was even happening. Suddenly, the main dude apologized. Suvo had said he was a solid player and they team up, but now he wasn't sure he could. He was also confident about the server thing, but said dreaming too big was his only real talent. And putting himself down didn't sit right with the blonde, so he shot back that he already knew how good the hero was since they'd played together. That's why he called Duyan to hit up that cyber cafe after class, because he needed to see what was up for himself. When they got to the spot, the main dude got ready to play some matches. But Suwa quickly told him to chill, saying he wasn't used to the machine and needed to test it out first. With a warm-up, he spent 10 minutes aiming at moving targets and adapting quickly. Sugo figured he just needed some practice. Finally, after a bit, Duyan said he was ready in both skill and gear. Then, the two hyped up and went to test the boy in a new match. Suvo, watching from a distance, knew Duyan didn't belong in gold rank, and being there was the only way to figure out what was wrong. Anyway, just like before, even while giving it his all, the main dude faced another brutal defeat. But Suwa was more worried than he was. In fact, the boy was scared because he finally got why he kept losing. Even with better internet and a solid computer, he needed to tweak some things. And the first was the game's voice chat. Surprisingly, Duan didn't even know what that was. Then the blonde realized it'd be better to show him through a replay of his game, which he also had to explain since the boy didn't know the game recorded his matches. Finally, starting the replay, it became clear that he greeted the team when the game kicked off. But there was the first mistake, which didn't make sense to the boy since he just said, "Hi." Dion asked if he couldn't be polite, but he misunderstood because the issue wasn't about getting rid of trolls. The main goal of the game is to complete missions and win, but people play in all sorts of ways. Some are totally focused on winning like them, and others couldn't care less about the score. There are also those who just want to explore the scenery like they're on a hike, and those who enjoy buying items to deck out their characters. But the worst group the main dude should steer clear of are the trolls who just love messing with people. So he was totally losing because of the trolls who were wrecking his matches. To break it down, Shugul pulls the protagonist in to watch the replay closely. First up is the dinner troll who bounces to grab snacks right in the kicks off. Next to him is the pessimistic troll who's convinced he's going to lose before the match even starts. And the musical troll who blasts tunes on the mic. One's rambling about food, another's whining, and the last one's just blasting music like it's a concert. And the last dude, he's only moving every minute to dodge getting kicked. So, when the protagonist tries to chat with just 20 seconds before the match, he sees everyone pick the damage-focused class. Thinking he could help, he decides to go support, but that was a major misstep. Duan says his teammates are going to flop without healing, but Sua's like, nah, they're doomed anyway. The pessimist already charged at the enemies, got himself wrecked, and was trashing the support. Meanwhile, the snack troll is munching away and the others just chilling in the corner. At the same time, the music troll's trying to sync his dance emoji with the beat. To win, the team needs tanks, supports, and damage dealers. That balance is what lets players snag those wins, but they got to give it their all. If you check out high and low ILO players, the gap is wild. So, the boy says the protagonist won't get anywhere if he doesn't step up. That's why Duyan asks what he'll do if they start trash-talking in voice chat. But Sua's all about ignoring them, leaving Dion a bit puzzled. To clarify, the blonde points out how the protagonist still shines even while picking support. Back on the American server, he couldn't chat with anyone because of the language barrier. So, Sua asks what he did back then, bringing back some memories. The truth is, the protagonist used the few English words he knew. And that's the vibe. Ignore everything that's not game-related. Just do what needs to be done without stressing over what others think. After all, the other asks if he wants to win, and the protagonist knows. He does deep down. If he got the chance to fight, you could totally win. If he was attacking, he'd have a shock to flip the game. But now, if he realized that after all those days grinding in that yellow, he was the best there. Juan wasn't trying to hype himself up. It was just facts. When he logged in, he ran into the same 4 players from the last match. The pessimist wasted no time whining about seeing that awful support again. But this time, he was in the DPS role, which just made him even more annoyed. Instead of listening to the nonsense, The boy tells his partner to shut it and switch classes. Even the dinner troll agreed to pick something more fitting. In the end, they didn't even need to step in because Duyan wiped the floor with the enemies, bringing home the win for the trolls he carried. The next day at school, Duyan rolls in with the awesome news that he's hit master rank. Sue's grinning with excitement, saying it's no shocker. Finally, the protagonist hyped, too, and now nothing can stop the squad from signing up for the tournament. Meanwhile, a super busy woman's tidying up while grumbling about being treated like a maid. After all, she's joining the competition, and there's no way she can train in this chaos. With 53,000 people watching live, Swaga jumps in saying the registrations for the CJ Bond Cup are closed. He cracks a joke when announcing the competition, but didn't expect the hype. So, he just asks everyone not to be shocked because even pro players signed up. The manager of these players just formed a new team and 3 members are in. So, the crowd's buzzing, betting it'll be pure entertainment. Still, Sweeten says he's all about fair play, so he'll randomly pick the teams. To balance things out, he spins a roulette based on ranks. In the end, 2 pros get picked to play along with some other big names. Many are calling it a scam, saying there aren't that many pros in the scene, and the names are kept under wraps until the day of the competition. Plus, if anyone asks why he's not playing, Subot makes it clear that as a solid silver, he's just here to commentate. The next day, news about Swabot and the tournament spread through the school faster than a TikTok trend. Duyan thinks it'll be a cakewalk to win if Suwa joins the competition. Jury, who's chilling a bit away, believes it'll be a legendary combo. She strolls over and asks why they're always stuck together. But when Suwa brushes her off to keep chatting with the main dude, Jury shoots Duyan a death stare. Eventually, she gives up on wasting her time there, which the blonde totally misses. Everyone's still wondering why Subod's a commentator when he's not even gold. Back in class, after everyone bounced, Duyan says, sorry, he really wanted to dip, not expecting all this pressure on him. Duyan feels like everyone's eyes are on him, and Suwa says it's cause they know he's competing. But the boy remembers that no one knows they're Dway yet. Even Suwa admitted he felt the jitters when he heard legends would be in the mix. But they totally earned their spot for the ranking. And even though the protagonist thinks about messing it up during the competition, the blonde disagrees. Not to mention the heavy hitters they had cuz besides Duan, they could also count on Jae Nam on the squad. From the protagonist's question, it said he's known as Mam, a legend in multiple pro leagues. Duan feels a wave of relief with someone so seasoned, and that's why Suwa tells him to chill. With 2 pro players in the game, it probably meant Miho Du would be on the other team. This guy was in one of the pro leagues with Jae Nam and was the top player there. So good that Duyan might not even make a dent in the game. But Suwa couldn't drop that bomb on him. After all, he wasn't confident enough and was naturally more of a wallflower. Even though they'd been in school for months, Suwa only recently started talking to Duyan, especially since he always seemed to put himself on the sidelines. Suwa still can't figure out why he's so introverted. But that lack of confidence is what holds him back. A bit later, Jury notices someone while gaming. And thank goodness it's Suwa. For her, since the only open seats in the cyber cafe are next to her. The blonde has no choice but to sit down. Of course, Jury is hyped to have some one-on-one time with him. But just when she's about to make that happen, Duyan, who was in the bathroom, shows up once. Again, Jury's bloodthirsty glare lands on the poor guy. Jury yells that Suwa is a fool for always ignoring her, but plays with Duyan every day. Then, Suwa thinks of a way to explain himself without spilling the tea on the tournament, but not caring about sounding rude. He lets it slip that Jury should find someone else to play with since she's so needy. The girl couldn't even think about playing with someone else because she had her reasons. But she also didn't lower herself to beg and left, cursing his upcoming matches. In the end, Suwa still doesn't get why she acts so weird. But he brushes it off so they can be aimed soon and test a new setup. That is until a scream breaks the vibe and noticing it's a girl's voice. Suvo bolts over to see her sprawled on the hallway floor. He asks if she slipped, but she says she actually bumped into a guy while leaving. She apologized, but he still yanked her arm and shoved her down. Sugo can't believe it and asks why that happened, but the answer he gets is soda splashing in his face. Still dripping, and Guy says, Jury deserved it for spilling his drink. After processing the nonsense he just heard, Sugo yells for that punk to grow up. Sugo tries to explain that this kind of stuff shouldn't happen. But Duyan also shows up to confront this weirdo, and for some reason, the troublemaker's face lights up with a grin. After all, it had been ages since he last saw that loser so clearly scared. Duan greets John in a super rude way. Ander asks if the boy is still playing his little games. Since he thinks Duyan is still destined to lose, he sees no point in it. And just by the look they give each other, it's clear there's some past drama. While they chat, Suwa is curious if they know each other. Sander asks if the protagonist is with the others because of the uniform, judging that he isn't and stating that Trash doesn't have friends. Suwa still can't wrap his head around who this dude thinks he is, but he figures arguing with someone that wild is just a waste of breath. I mean, not only was Jury shook, but Duan looked super uncomfortable, too. In the end, Suluo decided it was smarter to bounce before things got messy. But out of nowhere, it was the troublemaker who got smacked on the head. What neither Suwa nor the main character saw coming. As soon as that soda can hit the ground, it was clear Juri was the one who threw it. Then, totally stunned, Sander just asks if the girl has lost her marbles. Juri, standing her ground, tells the delinquent to scram, and in a nice way, defends Duan by saying he's her friend. Plus, she goes straight for the jugular, cursing him and saying he's not the only one who can throw shade. So, the two just stare each other down for a sec, while everyone holds their breath. But then, out of nowhere, the tension gets sliced by the sound of Sander's phone ringing, which against his will, he has to pick up and step away a bit to hear what's up. Even worse, it seemed like he was getting a call. So, Juri got super annoyed that he just wanted to dip without saying sorry. But Sander just shocked her that classic offensive hand gesture, making Juri even angrier, and Sugo breathed a sigh of relief. He still didn't get how things spiraled this way, but with no time to waste, Duan got back to the competition, bringing the blonde back into focus. Later that same day, Juri was really thankful for the ride home. Sugo was worried about how her parents would react to her messed-up uniform, but Juri said she'd just whip up an excuse. Anyway, she was genuinely happy he came to help, and she said goodbye with a big smile. This made Suwa start to see the girl in a better light. After a few more minutes of saying goodbye to Juri, the boys met up to head back together. But on the way, the blonde couldn't help but ask who that guy from earlier was. Then, Duan explained that he was a friend he used to chill with for fun. And this finally clicked for Suwa, helping him understand why the main character had so many self-esteem issues. Maybe because it was still a tough thing to deal with. The two said their goodbyes kind of abruptly. And that night back at home, New England sat alone in the corner of his room to sort through his thoughts. The first memory he had with Sander was when the troublemaker smashed his video game in half with a kick. But in his mind, it made sense since someone as much of a loser as Duan wouldn't need that. The next morning, the day kicks off with Juri's dazzling smile. Suwa asked how it went, and the girl said she had no drama with her parents. Anyway, since today was her cleaning day, Juri had to head out to take out the trash, and Suwa seemed pretty stoked. But just as he was about to chat with Duyan, he realized the dude was NIA. Right behind Juri, the main character called her name. At first, he offers to help. But before anything else, he also apologizes for yesterday. Of course, Juri brushes it off and says that guy wasn't worth her time, but the main character could feel how much her body was shaking at that moment. While being protective, Duyan felt the girl's cold hands, and they wouldn't stop trembling. Then, Juri dropped the act, her eyes filled with tears. Next, the girl admits it was the first time something like this happened, which made Suwa take the situation more seriously. Sometime later, Duyan puts on his headset and settles into a chair in front of a monitor to finally dive back into the game. Suwa, already online, asks how the new headset is. Then, the boy thanks him for letting him borrow it. Even though it means nothing to the blonde, Duan still finds it weird to talk instead of type, but Suwa says it's chill and remembers when his brother would show up thinking he was being called. Anyway, since 5 players are needed for a match, the others start to join. Exactly 3 players connect. The first being called Spellboy Ranked Grandmaster, the second K9 Ranked Legend, and the last and most famous Nam also Ranked Legend. Practically everyone greets each other super enthusiastically. However, remembering that Sander would also join since he was at the cyber cafe, Suwa realizes he might just end up facing him. Putting that aside, the blonde's eyes light up like never before because on his other side is his idol N. Suwa spills the tea about being the biggest fan of this dude. And guess what? Name's heard of him too thanks to some live streams. So, there's this kid in the mix, but when he hears the voice, Suwa's totally caught off guard by how deep it is. Finally being the last one to say hi, Suwa goes with a hello, probably thinking it could be Xander. But after checking him out and being super chill, the blonde brushes that thought aside, keeping it friendly. Now that he's got some clarity, Suwa feels way more chill. And just then, someone pops in calling for attention. None other than the streamer who kicked off the whole competition rolls in. Spellboy looks at him like he's seen a total legend. And the streamer goes around greeting everyone. While giving Spellboy some love, he shakes hands with the main guy, and he thanks them again, saying the event wouldn't be as epic without their help. First up, he calls Spellboy for a pic. And you can see he's totally vibing with emotions. Suvo checks in asking if the main guy is nervous, telling him to chill. Nams jumps in asking if they know each other, and the blonde says they're school buddies. The pro player thinks that's wild since he came with a friend, too. Back to the streamer, he mentions he set up a training arena for them and formed a team with 5 other contenders. And guess what? Name just friend is one of those 5. Suwa can't even believe this is real because that friend is E.G. Ha. Even though they said 3 pros signed up, Suwa had no clue she was in the mix. Meanwhile, the friends are just chatting it up, all chill. But some grumbles about only noms competing slipped through the mic, sparking curiosity since they're in the same room. Regardless, Suvo's feeling pumped about becoming a pro someday and joining a famous squad with them. So, while he thought he'd just be a spectator, the streamer tells them to enjoy and kicks off the game. On the main guy's team, Spellboy kicks things off, asking who's taking what position. Nams jumps in asking about everyone's strengths. Without a second thought, Suvo and the short dude pick tank to back everyone up, while K9 goes for DPS, and Duian hangs back a bit. Nams thinks it's weird that the lowest ranked player is taking so long, so he checks out the main guy's ranked match history. And he's totally shook. Seconds later, Nams rolls over to ask if he's picked tank or DPS. Spellboy thinks it's wild that he even gets to choose, but Namj explains it's just a warm-up match. Feeling a bit more confident, the main guy finally says he's going DPS. And without a fuss, Nam picks support to help the squad. Since the opponents are solid, Nam says no time to waste and asks who the main tank is. Spellboy jumps in all hype, saying he can take that role, especially since when he shows his true form, it's clear he's a beast. The whole enemy team knows they gotta take him out first. At first, the boy looks like he's ready to devour his opponents. But naturally, when the enemy team starts focusing on him, his health and confidence start to shrink. At the most critical moment, he gets healed by Nam, who's working his support magic from a distance. The boy shouts for Spellboy not to stress about healing because he's got cover. Then, that monster tank breaks free with even more power than before. Quickly, the DPS players line up behind Spellboy to deal some damage, but the tank himself takes advantage of the front line and delivers a crazy punch, making one enemy vanish with that insane strength. The Hyle players are left speechless, trying to process what just went down. Stovo thanks Nan for the healing, but warns they can handle the rest. Unlike when he was under fire, Spellboy looks ready to tape them all down. Then EG starts to sweat a bit, worried about how things are going. She's got experience in ranked matches with K9, who's heard rumors about joining a team. But she's not worried about Spellboy. It's that dude in the back who's super strong, even as just a simple master. Suddenly, near the ally team's crystal, an enemy sneaks up behind Nam. Unfortunately, the pro player doesn't react fast enough, but someone's there to back him up, hitting that intruder multiple times, and that someone is Duan. The team jumps right back into action, but even with Suwa hyping up the protagonist, Nam starts giving him the side-eye. Suabots is feeling the same vibe because after that performance, it's hard not to think he was flexing about his rank. By the end of the game, everyone crushed it, but Duan totally stole the show with 17 kills and 0 hits taken. Spellbow is beaming with pride while K9's just chilling in silence, deep in thought. Sua lifts the hero up, saying he practically sold the game. But Duhan's all about sharing the glory with the squad, and that's a vibe everyone can get behind. Switching gears, Spellboy asks if the pro player still wants to swap roles. But after a moment, the boy decides to keep things as they are, which honestly leaves everyone scratching their heads. Spellboy jumps in saying he's a legend and can't let some random master take the damage-dealing spot. It makes way more sense for the pro to focus on offense, right? That's where the action is. But Nam's quick to say the protagonist handled that pressure like a champ. At the game's end, the streamer gives a shout-out to everyone, saying they totally exceeded his expectations. He goes on to hype up both the DPS and the tanks who were straight up amazing. As a simple silver, he knows he could never hang in a game like this. Still, he pauses the celebrations to ask one of them something. Getting straight to the point with Psychop, the streamer says he knows he's probably not a master. Everyone's jaws drop at this, so Suwa jumps in to explain, but Squabit cuts him off. He wants to hear it from the protagonist, which is a total nightmare for an introvert, so is ready to help. But before anything, Duian spills the tea. He says the account's in his name, and it's not some backup one. Plus, he's not using any shitty programs or throwing games to get an edge. So Swagbot quickly asks for the deets. Finally, the protagonist lays out the whole story about starting on the North American server and just jumping onto the Korean one. Then the streamer asks what his rank was on the other server, and without hesitation, the boy says he was a legend. The higher level players don't seem fazed, but Spellbow is left speechless. Once again, silence fills the room until the streamer seems to put the pieces together. Suvo can't help but think of a scenario that doesn't end with Duong getting kicked out. But even with the punishment looming, Subit thinks the story is super cool. In his eyes, this is going to blow up on social media, and that means millions of views, which is what really matters in this capitalist world. Suwa asks if there will be any issues, but Su reassures him that there won't be since Duan didn't mean to mess up. Speaking of which, he also mentions they're lucky because the master ranked player on Team 2 quit, so they just need to grab one more legend to even things out. Everyone's on board, but once again, EG's voice cuts through Nam's mic, begging to be picked. Then the streamer makes it clear he'll randomly choose someone from the reserves. After all this chaos, Sua looks at the protagonist and, letting out a long sigh, gives him a relieved hug. But before they can chat, Sua calls the whole team to hook them up with a prize, which is a skin. Duan's mind is blown since he's got nothing in his inventory. Then Squagbot thanks them for competing in his player event. He's super stoked that this cup is getting so big, and that's why he wanted to create an official uniform for each team. Suddenly, the protagonist's clothes start glowing a bright gold, and without lifting a finger, that skin gets equipped on his character. Of course, since it's a team uniform, The same thing happens to everyone else. Spellboy thinks the outfit is fire, and Sugo jokes that the protagonist can finally ditch that white outfit. Even is feeling it. But in his room, he's analyzing Duyin, who hit pro level in just 40 games. With stats that perfect, he asks his brother Minho if he doesn't find that interesting too. It looks like the replay of the last game from the very start to just 9/10 of a millisecond. Duan had a reaction, and even with just 20 milliseconds, the boy managed to lock onto his target. This reaction time is something Nam definitely thinks is way too good to be true for anyone. Moreover, he was a total legend on the North American server while grinding in Korea. Anyway, the dude gets up, calling both his brother and EG, who's feeling down to grab some food. She really wanted to be in the cup to show off her skills, but sadly that's not happening now. Regardless, Minho kept daydreaming about this new potential game-changer called Psychop. At lightning speed, both the main guy and Spellboy dash off until the little dude spots something that could be an enemy. Noticing it was aiming at the main guy, he tries to shout out the location, but in a panic, the worst happens first. So, Nam pauses the game and drops some wisdom. They've been grinding non-stop, so he figured it was time for them to bond a bit. After all, as a solid team, they should vibe together, which sounds assumable like something a wise sage would say. First, they needed to pick some nicknames, and for him, it would be J, short for Jam. Spellboy, on the other hand, decides to roll with Mr. Boy, and K9 goes with K9. Suo, for his part, picks the nickname Aegis for himself, and when asked, explains that it's pronounced in English. Aegis is supposedly the name of Zeus's shield, and the way you say it is Aegis, with a strong emphasis on the G. Duam thinks that's epic, and Mr. Boy finally gets how to say it right. Anyway, Suo mentions that his name also means something cool, which is to protect in Korean. But he plays his DPS, and getting back to the point, he's cool with the nickname Aegis. Now, the biggest issue was Psychop because for some reason he was shaking. Inevitably, Duyin has to spill that he didn't pick his name thinking he ever explained it. Namps, though, was just curious about what the nickname meant. So, the main guy replies a bit shy that it means Reaper. Coming straight from Greek mythology, Spellboy cracks up because he thought it meant psychopath, but seeing the boy's face, he asks why he chose that name. Duan was ready to say he didn't have a solid reason, but seeing Sua's eager look of curiosity, he caved and revealed that since his name means guiding people, he used the Reaper symbolism to create the phrase guiding people to death. Anyway, Sua knows some folks really try to find a cool name in the dictionary for their nicks. Many struggle to come up with good names and search for words in other languages that sound dope. So, keeping all this in mind, Nam simplified the story behind the nickname. But the next morning, when Sugo calls him Reaper, Duan looks super uncomfortable, maybe feeling a bit silly. Sugo decides to stick with the original nickname anyway, but their convo gets interrupted by notification sounds. Looks like all the online forums are buzzing like crazy since a spike in competition has been announced. And of course, this reaction was something Suo totally saw coming. On Team 2, among the players who will be talked about later was Minho, whose nickname is Domino. Suo finds it a bit discouraging, but tries to stay positive since he has the main guy on the team, which also makes him quiet, thinking he might be putting pressure on his friend. But for some reason, Duyin doesn't seem scared now. So, the blonde is stoked to see him, showing some confidence. Anyway, Sugo keeps thinking that Sander has to show up. And in a wild coincidence, the main guy starts talking about the same dude, saying it's the nickname Nahlis on the list. In the end, Duan already knew the weirdo would be in it from the start. However, even though he seemed different, he admits he's not that confident. After all, he's never beaten Sander in a one-on-one match. But even without a win under his belt, due to the emotional weight he carries, Duyum insists this time will be different. So, it's clear the blonde doesn't doubt the boy's determination. In the end, he knows he'll face a tough opponent, but CI Bond isn't a solo game. It's all about teamwork. Back at the school entrance, everyone spots Sugo and rushes over to ask if he's really joining the cup. Because of this, while the main guy is sworn by the crowd, he confirms he's totally in. And of course, that announcement just makes the fans even more hyped. Later, a dude asks if his friend wants to hang out on Saturday, but he turns it down because of the cup. The friend, for his part, doesn't play this game, but keeps pushing him to give a shot. And since everyone's buzzing about it, he feeling a bit left out, decides to chill at the same house. It's totally normal for everyone to gather with friends for this event, but a girl says she needs to watch with her sister. Her friend asks if it's the sister who's in the gaming scene, and she nods. The same friend even asks if the girl has played, but she's not into it because what she really loves is just watching. Anyway, when she realized it, she was solo and the chaos of the main character is popping up to chat about the next game in her heart. At some point back in the game, Spellboy asks if the protagonist is cool because he doesn't seem chill. Anyway, Jay asks if everyone's ready, and unlike the boy, Dwan nearly passes out. As the leader names checks if the Reaper is okay, but since he heard a ton about the competition at school, SUA explains that he's nervous. Then, putting his hands on the protagonist's shoulders, he tells Dwan to shake off his worries and give it his all. and the conversation skills totally impress the blonde. Anyway, the streamer drops a message saying he'll kick off the broadcast at 3 p.m. So, everyone nods to show they got the memo. Finally, the 3 p.m. chimes on all the clocks in Korea. Ben, introducing himself as Swagbuzz 9000. The streamer launches the moment everyone's been hyped for. This is the main event of the first PC Bond Cup he's organizing. So, all over the country, people are already cinced up and ready, even at the house of that girl, the sister in the gaming scene. On the flip side, he doesn't seem too stoked. But back to the broadcast, Swag but soon announces he's got another commentator joining. Then he reaches out to welcome the legendary game commentator, Yumpo Kim. This dude is a famous streamer turned pro commentator, so he's all about creating a dope experience. More and more people are blown away by the level of professionalism in the broadcast. But checking out the team lineup, what shocks everyone is that there are 3 legends on each side. Yumpo, for his part, is curious why it's a tournament when they're only having 1 match. Then annoyed by the question, Suabot snaps back that he'd know if he'd been following his streams. Every time he tried to play, he got wrecked for being terrible. That's exactly why he got so mad that he offered $1,000 to anyone who could actually play. Well, then someone made a poster and spread it across various online forums, getting everyone hyped. In the end, even though it wasn't planned, this is the story that led to the current moment. So, leaving the past behind, the two decide to focus on the game, because first up is an interview with the captain of Team 1. The sister of that girl from school freaks out when she sees him, but maybe it's just because of his friendly smile that hits different. Yumpo gives credit for the huge audience to Nam. And when it comes to facing Miho, the streamer asks for a statement. Having to give an opinion so suddenly makes the boy think. But unlike what you'd expect from a nice guy, Nam says Team 2 is going down, shocking the commentators. Anyway, the one most affected by this was Duan, who dropped to his knees, feeling more pressure than ever. In Psionic Vagabond, the game is set in a far-off and dystopian future. In that game, a girl runs for her life until she gets grazed in the face by a projectile. Right behind her is the one who fired a shot and a samurai ready to take her out. Inevitably, from above everyone, that girl with the sword prepares to deliver a fatal blow, and the blade is coming for her until suddenly, for some reason, her eyes start to glow weirdly, causing her to vanish right in front of her enemies. The samurai's sword slams into the ground, making a crater, and when the dust clears, they're left wondering where she went. But even though they search, it's tough to find her on the street because the girl teleported to the top of a building. In this game world, people have something called ESP, which basically gives them powers like telekinesis or teleportation. With all kinds of resources at their disposal, player gangs use these supernatural powers and the power of special crystals to mark their territory and expand their domain. On the flip side, there are also regular fighters who battle against the gangs with basic weapons. Psionic Vagabond basically shows an endless war between humans and superhumans fighting for territory. Andy Numpo's view, it fuels a rivalry between the groups. Superhumans flex a bunch of skills that make the game way more fun, but they pack less of a punch. On the flip side, regular folks hit hard, but can't move around as slick, making things tougher. So, yeah, that's why most tanks and supports are superhumans. Switching gears, Yumpo thinks a lot of pros in this comp will roll with the normals. But instead of spilling tea, Swagbutt hits up Team 1's captain, who's grinning ear to ear. All the forums treat Namps like he's a total rock star, and even Swagbug's curious about his vibe. So, the dude spills that he's been vibing with the streamers' lives and thought joining would be a blast. Changing the subject, Yumpo asks how the squad's holding up. Nam says they've got some solid players and promises everyone's going to have a blast. That's why the streamer's curious about who's going to be the MVP in the next match. And out of nowhere, he shouts on national TV for everyone to keep an eye on Psychop. From the look on the protagonist's face, it's clear he's feeling the heat. And with Subot poking about Minnow, the team leader pauses, but he gives the same answer as before, claiming he'll totally wreck his team. With all that leader energy, the crowd's buzzing, and that girl's sister takes a sip. Anyway, Swabot wishes Nam good luck, and then calls up Team 2 for their intro, but, for some reason, he doesn't connect the stream. A bit awkward, Swabot asks if the young dude's feeling nervous, but it's obvious when Miho just says he'll give it his all, which freaks out the presenters. For the C-Bond Cup, the prize is a cool 1,000 for the winning squad. As mentioned earlier, Yumpo is going to be the commentator, so Swagbot quickly calls Team 1 to meet them. Decked out in their uniforms, everyone's hyped, and Yumpo knows this lineup is stacked. Aegis could totally be a celeb, and K9s is about to get signed by a team. But here's the kicker. The protagonist, who's a master rank, is in the mix. Still, he's the one Nams told everyone to watch, so he's not slipping under the radar. Finally, they hype up Spellboy, giving him props for his ranked games, which makes him tear up. Anyway, wrapping up the first intro, Team 2 gets called, and the first spotlight is on that troublemaker from earlier. Right there in front of Duodin is his old buddy Sander Young. After ages apart, a showdown's about to go down, and this time the protagonist not backing down. But before the match kicks off, Neopolis pulls the boy aside for a chat, leaving Duyan feeling all kinds of confused and anxious. Just the look Xander gives him sends chills down his spine. Suha notices something's off and asks if his buddy's feeling jittery. He even jokes about needing a bathroom break since there's still time before the match. When Duyan stays quiet, Suha nudges him to spill the tea. Then, still shaking, the protagonist mentions the chat invite from Xander. Duyan asks for advice, knowing he'll get heated if he doesn't accept, but he's not down for that combo. Then, Suha gets super annoyed with that jerk, sensing he's trying to mess with his friend's head before the game. The blonde thinks it's obvious the protagonist should just ghost the invite, but he's not here to force him. But someone else is, and even from a distance, the same phrase echoes. Jury's right there where our hero is gearing up for the championship match. The girl jokes about it being a wild coincidence and asks if he's being followed, but of course, the protagonist says no, not even thinking twice. Anyway, she plops down, apologizing for the joke since she already knew he was there. But she also asks if he's playing and warns that someone wants to chat with him. Jury's curious if he'll accept. And when Duyan says it's Xander, she's like, who's that? But in a flash, she remembers. That jerk who pushed her down at the cyber cafe. She yells, asking if they're friends, but Duyan shoots that down. Then she snatches the boy's mouse to reject the request for him, which makes Suha grin. Despite that, Xander sends another request, making the protagonist's anxiety hit the roof. Rejection after rejection, but for some reason, he keeps sending them, and Jury struggling to keep saying no. But even after a bunch of seconds, that dude's still acting like a total stalker as he kept inviting the protagonist, and the plans were almost set. Sugo freaks out. Jury, already super annoyed, declares she'll put the troublemaker in his place, but she's got a better plan. With a sly grin at the protagonist, she signals him to wrap things up his way. Still confused, she nudges him to say something, but makes it clear she's got his back on the speech. Heading to Xander's room, he's still pushing to invite the protagonist. Unbelievably, the dude seems clueless about why Duan is dodging him. But then the chat gets accepted, and he's totally relieved. Once they're in the chat, Xander kicks things off by calling Duyan a loser, but Psychop fires back with a middle finger emoji. And then he bounces from the room, leaving Xander stunned by that bold move. Duan doesn't even flinch at Xander, just blocks him like a pro. Maybe it's new for him, but it takes a sec for the realization to hit. And when it does, Xander goes full rage mode. Jury laughs so hard she feels a cramp in her stomach. Since the protagonist had the last word, she totally vibes with the guy's frustration. But as the game is about to kick off, Jury tells Duyan to focus and says she'll chill for now. Back in the game, the blonde tells the protagonist to stop wasting time. The arena announcement starts, and luckily at the last second, the boy makes it through the portal with the squad. With everyone gathered, the host announces the goal is to capture the base mark by 0.1. After that, teams will battle for points. A 2, a 3, B2, and B3, aiming for 3 points total. Scoring happens by capturing a crystal area and converting it. It takes 3 seconds for that, and each team sees the objectives in purple. When the first round wraps, the second kicks off right away. The losing team will have the second point revealed, giving the winner a chance. The team that loses will go into a defense round, sticking close to the respawn area, which makes it easier. So, the next rounds will roll on until 5 rounds are done, and everyone will be gunning for that crystal advantage. It's basically an epic 5-on-5 showdown for the first point. But from the protagonist view, there's a twist because even a 5-on-5 game, for obvious reasons, Xander seems laser focused on Duan. When it's time to pick classes, the protagonist goes for the normal class and the attacker role. Then, he picks his weapon and abilities, and with everyone ready, he's sure they'll crush it. Finally, the game kicks off to capture the first objective. Point. Nan warns that snagging the objective is key and tells SUA to watch everyone's backs. Being the frontliner, Spellboy spots 5 enemies and transforms to get ready to fight. K9, though, points out one of the 5 is MIA, which throws Nam off a bit until he spots Neopolis sneaking up from the back, hinting at some sneaky movement skills. Xander's plan was probably to take out the healer from behind, but when he had the chance, the dude just zooms past Nam going straight for Duyan. Luckily, at the last second, the protagonist dodges a brutal elimination. Even as a low HP assassin, he's acting like a tank, zeroing in on Duyan. But since he revealed his position, Suvo is ready to jump in and help. Yampo screams in panic as they wrap up the first kill with only 10 seconds gone. And the first blood goes to Neophilus from Team 2, who's a legendary rank. Swimbot explains he took a movement ability to sneak in. But unexpectedly, instead of targeting the healer, he goes for the team's DPS. Swabot thinks he did this because in the first 30 seconds, the abilities were hidden. From his perspective, since Nams is the pro player, Xander might thought he was the DPS instead of the support. Even the spectators are scratching their heads about why Nams let a master be the attacker. Spellboy asks if the guy is trolling, but Jay chimes in, agreeing with Swagbot. It seemed like putting a master as DPS was a solid strategy. But Suan knew for sure that the attack on Duan wasn't a mistake. Anyway, with this edge, he starts capturing the first objective point of the game. The assassination plan from the second team totally flopped, and Neapolis was back in the game responding. The presenters thought he'd chill and wait for his squad to respond, but nah, that wasn't happening. Spell Boy is totally lost, wondering why he's rolling solo. Knowing where Jay is, the ally team surrounds the healer to keep him safe. But once again, Nam gets the cold shoulder, and our main dude has to stay sharp because, just like before, he's the target of his old buddy's rage. Of course, with the numbers on their side, Sander gets hit hard by the Ollie team and gets taken out for the second time without breaking his sweat. Now, the presenters are losing it because the enemy team has to wait for him to respond. They think the only reason for this chaos is that the team's not vibing well together. But Nam being the boss of Team 1 isn't buying that. He shots for a new attack. A half-beast girl swoops in from above to take a swing at the healer, who barely dodges. Still, she's quick and starts landing hits like it's nothing. Lucky for the pro player, Duan takes her out with a 6 shot, but then out of nowhere, he feels something off. He's blinded by a crowd control ability. And just when he starts to see again, Sander pops up right in front of him with a creepy grin. With a swift move, he takes out the protagonist. After getting wrecked, Duan says sorry, but Subwa's got his back, saying they'll wait for him to respond. Meanwhile, Names keeps supporting, but wonders why one enemy is MIA in the team fight. Finally, after what feels like forever, the protagonist responds at the base and bolts to help, but the missing enemy sneaks up behind him and lands a nasty slash on his back. Duan yells, calling out the enemy for being in the wrong spot instead of in the center. Suwa can't believe it, and even Yumpo is throwing shade, saying, "This isn't the time for that." Team 2 needed to fight fair to grab the crystal, but even as the main DPS, Neapolis heads back to Team 1's base. This attacker was the same one who tried to take out the protagonist earlier. Nams tosses aside his earlier thoughts and realizes it's personal rivalry time. Through the team chat, Duan warns he's being held up and says sorry for it. But Nams fires back that they're not the only ones taking hits from this strategy. In fact, Jay is convinced Team 2 isn't cool with this and calls Xander a troll, which surprises the protagonist. So, the leader's order is for our hero to flip the situation to his advantage. From Team 2's side, the half-paced girl is yelling, wondering why she's flying solo. A blonde girl apologizes and screams even louder, saying she's talking to Neapolis. She's been salty about him since he pressured the master-ranked player. Meanwhile, the blonde starts crying, asking if they can team up. But the boy couldn't care less until another calls him a nuisance. Sander's been fixated on taking Duan out of the game, but he's failing hard, proving he's not cut out for this. So, the one who seems to be the leader tells him to log off and just watch the team play. Everything makes it seem like the boy forgot the game's goal and doesn't even want to play anymore. If he wants to throw the game, the leader's cool with it, but won't let him drag his teammates down too, calling Sander a troll, just like Nam. In her head, the blonde agrees, but feeling awkward, asks the two to chill. Finally, Neapolis pushes that anger aside and says he's going after the tank because they can't lose. Obviously, everyone's confused about why he's backing down so easily. But the blonde warns that Neapolis doesn't talk back to anyone with a higher rank than him, especially since he's got a clear goal. And even though the team isn't fully on board with him, they've got no choice. Back at the center of the action, the presenters are buzzing about the round wrapping up soon. Sufo is fending off the half-beast girl who's giving her all to reach the crystal, but he doesn't see Xander sneaking up behind him until it's too late. Civil Neapolis has a trick up his sleeve as both Duan and the blonde turn on him, forcing him to retreat for now. In the final seconds, the girl screams for Benny to help, and the player really bolts as fast as he can to the crystal. He touches the objective and starts to capture it, but with only 3 seconds left in the match, it's a total no-go since he's all alone there. Benny fails to snag the point, and having only lost 1% of health, the crystal bounces back to 100%. So, the first round wraps up with Team 1 scoring a win. Spellboy and K9 are hyped, screaming about the team's first victory. In the next round, point B2 for Team 2 opens up, and they got to defend it for 5 minutes. Then Neapolis chimes in on voice chat, saying he'll be back in time. Honestly, the hosts are kind of bummed about the lack of epic battles. Yono blames the teamwork issues, but knows the real showdown is just getting started. Meanwhile, viewers are scratching their heads, wondering why they're chasing eliminations instead of the objective. Anyway, with the first point in their pocket, Team 1 is in the lead, and the second attack on point B2 kicks off. Spellboy takes the lead, and when he starts feeling some shots, he warns about enemies working behind. On the second floor, 3 enemies pop up, and from the looks of it, they're going to be a handful. Even Sugo, chilling on the other side, gets hit. So it's clear. Team 2 is spread out, making Nam shout out some praise for their strategy. Compared to the first floor, the second and third are way better for sneaky plays. So, Nam says they got flushed them out first. Jay notices that even now, Neapolis is still keeping an eye on the protagonist. He doesn't sleep on him because of his sneaky ability called backstab, which is perfect for taking people out. When the guy suddenly vanishes, Nam warns the protagonist to watch his back. But what he didn't see coming was where Sander would teleport. In just 1 second, he's right behind him and without wasting time, goes for the attack. Then Duyan reacts fast, unleashing a storm of shots at the assassin. Finally, Swaba gives props to Team 2 for focusing on the healer. Not even Yumpo gets why they're suddenly working together. Anyway, it's time for Jay respond. And after getting knocked out, he feels a bit embarrassed. He apologizes and suggests they should focus on taking down the enemies. Maybe swapping attack ability for a movement one. After thinking for a sec, a protagonist summons a semi-automatic, and he warns that he'll flank from the right to try and deal some damage. Suvo says it'll be lit if he can take someone out, and even if he can't, he can still sneak in. So, the other flank gets assigned to another player, and the focus shifts back to the center where the crystal is chilling. With Benny on guard, the hero needs to stay sharp. He thinks he's not being seen and starts gathering intel on the enemy's positions. Then, with that semi-automatic he summoned, he figures he should be able to take down at least one. He aims for the player's head since that's where the big damage hits thanks to the critical factor. Then, after a 3-second countdown, he pops up behind the guy in a flash, and before he can even react, the player is out of the game. By taking out one of the damage dealers, the hero signals to his team, who shows up right away. He knows the tank must be hiding nearby, but the moment he gets distracted, he takes a hit to the stomach that knocks the wind out of him, and losing a chunk of HP, drops his weapon. In the end, Duan just asks when he showed up, but the leader of Team 2 isn't interested in answering. With at least 2 health bars left, the protagonist thinks he can still turn the game around. So, aiming for the enemy's weak spot, he decides to act. But unfortunately, a protective barrier pops up. He keeps attacking, but gets desperate when he realizes nothing's working. Nam, watching from a distance, warns that he can't provide support with things so tight. So, now the only option left for the protagonist is to bail the feint to trick the opponent. But just as he thinks of doing that, he gets hit in the stomach again. Then once more, he thinks, who the heck is this guy? And still no answer. The leader of Team 2, Mino, takes out Duan. After 2 more eliminations, Shugul warns about the hero's takedown. But since 3 enemies are down, Nam calls him to the crystal. And while the healer is capturing, the blonde is on cover duty until suddenly with a loud crash, Miho, who already took care of Duyan, shows up to finish off the rest. Unfortunately, at the same moment, Kain gets taken down, too. And to make things even worse, the blonde realizes that both remaining players from the enemy squad are closing in from both sides. While waiting to respond, the protagonist hears all the chatter from his teammates at that critical moment, even a scream. Then when he opens his eyes, he looks determined, but his hands start shaking and his face is not looking good at all. Compared to the last round, Team 2 seems way more in sync than Team 1 since they haven't even touched the crystal yet. Knowing how to use the map to their advantage, Team 2 has an epic defense going on. Swimbot said teamwork was key for Team 1's win in the first round, but this time the defense is on a whole new level. With Minnow acting as a human shield, charging in seems totally off the table. Snipers are usually clutch in defense, but his skills are changing the game so hard that no one can take him in a 1v1. With only 60 seconds left in the second round, Nam, who knows his teammates save their ultimate abilities, warns that they'll have one last shot. First, Zuvo needs to activate Berserk, which is a CC ability, and trap the enemies in a specific spot. From there, with his skills, he should be able to snag at least 2 players. Next, Dion's MSE ability will come into play, summoning a missile with insane destructive power. So, the best time for this is when the players are all bunched up and stunned, because if they can take out at least 2 in the fight, the strategy will totally pay off. Finally, K9 will unleash the fire tornado to wipe out the rest, and Spellboy will use the super dropping to boost his stats. So, everything hinges on Suwa pulling it off. But maybe because he wasn't paying attention when the ultimate was mentioned, Spellboy just activates it without asking and charges into battle. Right before their eyes, the plan starts to crumble. But now there's no time to complain. As the protagonist goes left, Nam yells for Suwa to cover the right. So he starts gearing up his ultimate. And jumping as high as he can, he comes face to face with 3 players from the enemy team. But one of them is Miho. And the dude doesn't look worried at all because when the blonde gets close, he pins him against the wall of the brutal punch. As if he had already predicted this, Miho stops the blonde's berserk ability. So even though he's feeling frustrated, En quickly switches up the plan and warns he'll attack with a debuff. But just as he finishes, he drops to the ground, knocked out by a skill from the blonde that puts him to sleep. In the end, he becomes the perfect target for Benny to take down easily. Then along with K9, the protagonist starts to unleash his ultimate ability. The MSE along with the fire tornado is launched at Miho, and taking that hit head-on breaks his armor. But the healer from Team Seed uses her abilities and brings everyone back to full health. The presenters can't believe the level of teamwork from that squad. But either way, this makes Team 2's defense a total success. At the end of the match, Spellboy apologizes and the team gets it. but then a message pops up saying the crystal has been activated. Sugo freaks out, and it's clear that Sander is behind this. The presenters also notice a missing player in the 3-on-3 battle, and with Neophilis kicking off the next round. Like this, it's what they call a sneaky attack. With Spellboy charging solo at the enemy front, Sander comments that something feels off. His teammate points out that the guy's aim isn't great either, and that Team 1 seems totally stunned. Neophilis calls the opponents amateurs for pushing like this, even though he had done the same before. Anyway, he asks how long the special ability lasts, and knowing it's only 10 seconds, soon Boy goes back to normal. And when he returns to normal, not only he but Nam and Suwa get taken out by the enemies, shocking the presenters. With only 2 DPS left, Neophilis says he'll back out from the rear, but his teammate yells not to. Still, they're in a 2 against 5 situation. Even if the other 3 respond, they won't make it in time to win the round. And that's exactly why Sander thinks it's better to chill a point at 2 for the next round. Since CM1 also has no ultimates left, the girl is left without any arguments. Then, after a few seconds apart there, at the area mark as a 2, Neelis extends his hand, causing a warning message about the point being restricted to pop up. Team 2 had the ultimate defense for this round. So when the countdown hits 0 using his flash ability which boosts movement speed the 3rd round, where Team 1 should defend point A2 kicks off with the crystal already being claimed by the other team, and judging Mike Sanders' face, he's totally vibing with this while the protagonist is not feeling it at all since it takes 5 minutes to fully activate the crystal. The viewers start debating even if both teams show up at the same time, they know Team 1 needs at least 15 more seconds. Finally back in the game, Suwa storms over to Sander annoyed and ready to shove him away from the crystal. But then a massive projectile zooms in from behind him, and when it lands, it totally blocks his way. This wall is also an ability that keeps enemies at bay for 10 seconds. So when that breaks, the blonde is super confused because even though it's their turn to defend, it feels like they're on the attack. The whole scene feels like a replay of a last round as Team 1 is basically losing the defense point already. Then the commentators think it's smarter to pull back and regroup. And that girl with the famous sister wonders if Jay is stressed. But honestly, the sister points out that the real issue is Team 1's DPS since the master rank player isn't holding up against Minnow. Anyway, the crystal capture count hits 100%, and just like that, another round ends in defeat for Team 1. The players are in shock because they had so many chances before this mess. For instance, they could have had more tanks and positioned themselves to force the enemy into a direct fight. Regardless, the 3rd round wraps up and the 4th with Team 2 still attacking is about to kick off. With Team 1 down 2 losses to 1 player, the commentators think it's game over. But not giving up, the leader asks about the defense, and Spellboy just bolts off, without a word, leaving the guy totally lost. Even the spectators got that the 3rd round was rough enough to crush the team's spirit. Spellboy was really beating himself up for not listening to Jay last round. Meanwhile, Suwa felt bad for not using his ultimate on the right target, and the protagonist was bummed about not taking down Sanders since they were kids. In the end, all 3 knew that if they lost this round, the game was over, and each was blaming themselves for the mess. So without wasting a second, Mam yells to his team that they can totally win. He questions why everyone looks so down and tells them to snap out of it because it's time to show a flawless defense that'll secure a 5th round. Then since the leader hasn't lost hope, both the blonde and Spellboy get pumped up again. But just as Suvo was about to share his hype with the hero, he noticed something super weird. He kept saying over and over that he couldn't win. Back at that girl's place, the famous sister asks if the hero's weapon is trash, but it's said to be better up close. In that case, she suggests he should use a bigger weapon. In the game, Suwa is giving it his all to pull the protagonist back to reality and starts to stress out. Anyway, the girl didn't know how to explain what she meant, but made it clear it would be a massive weapon. Because of the protagonist's lack of motivation, she couldn't get why he wouldn't use that. And Suwa's order was that Duan needed to regroup. With the mission set, it's now up to the 2nd team to attack point A3. And in District 7, whoever wins 3 rounds first takes the game. Unlike Team 2, which defended from a high-point lacrosse strategy, it looks like Team 1 is gearing up for a straight-up brawl. There's a pro player on both sides, but Miho is like an unbreakable wall, quickly shutting down enemy attacks. Meanwhile, Jae Nam is showing off as an incredible and versatile support player, but he seems to be wasting his skills. Naturally, the game situation is causing outrage for leaving a master in such a crucial spot. Viewers call him a silver, but even though the presenter knows that's not true given what's been shown, he wonders if he might have messed up. Putting those thoughts aside, Swagbot notices a player is missing in defense, and Yumpo says the same. So, Swagbot starts to freak out, hoping the protagonist isn't trolling. Anyway, Team 2 is led by Minnow, and that blonde girl starts prepping a buff spell for the squad. But, just as she's finishing up, she gets hit square in the face. The group members are totally confused at first, so that quirky girl with silver hair starts freaking out. While Yumpo is all surprised, the streamer feels a wave of relief wash over him. Honestly, the protagonist wasn't even the front line. he was chilling in the building behind. And when he checked out the boy's gear, Xander realized he was rocking a sniper build. The sniper is a long-range shooter who's all about stealth. In the enemy team's view, he switched rifles because he was testing stuff since he was about to lose. Thinking it was just a lucky shot, they figured it wouldn't happen again as long as they kept their eyes peeled. For now, the girl decided to keep watch, but noticed Duyan was Ma from that building. Still trying to figure out what the protagonist's ability is, she suddenly feels a chill run down her spine. So, the trigger gets pulled, and even though she caught on at the last second, the protagonist had already fired at the enemy player. With 2 players already out of the round, Miho, who's low on HP, realizes the gravity of the situation. Quickly, Alexander tells them to dip for now while they hunt for the sniper. Then, our hero takes aim at the former friend who barely dodges a shot to the legs. Xander feels insulted that the protagonist thinks he can catch him, but Duan stays chill. Finally, thinking he isn't good enough when he gets close enough, he can use his approachability. So, as he teleports behind him, this would be the perfect moment to wrap things up. That is if Duyan hadn't already predicted Xander would pop up there and wasn't already aiming at him. After all, he knew the guy was a pro at ambushes since they were kids. Xander grits his teeth and keeps saying the protagonist is a loser. But then the boy's gun trigger gets pulled and his former friend's head becomes a target under Duan's icy stare. Yampo panics, and the streamer is even more freaked out since only 15 seconds had passed since the round kicked off. Simply put, the sniper psychop pulled off the insane feat of taking down 3 players in 15 seconds. And he was so chill that he seemed like a totally different person from before. Then one of the spectators shouts, remembering when Nam said the protagonist would be the star of the team because he can flex his legendary rank account on the North American server. Back to the protagonist, his focus breaks when he hears he's out of the front line. So Suwa reassures him, saying that's not what he meant, and clarifies that now the boy is a sniper. Spellvoy chimes in that sniper got to be super skilled since they're the key players in the game. SUA explains that the hero's main role was as a sniper and that despite having issues on the Korean server, he's already adapted. Still, because of the crazy difficulty of the class, the blonde says they need to believe in him. And even though he initially thought he couldn't do anything with Xander around, the hero knew he could be a sniper. So not just N, but all the other team members agreed to trust the boy. Before heading back to his spot, Sugo tells the protagonist not to be scared because they're with pro players. Plus, being legendary level, Duyan is on the same tier and will definitely cause some chaos. Then, the protagonist gun sits lock onto Miho, who with a grin admits Nam's solid leadership. After a few shots, the pro player's shield shatters that he freaks out because he realizes he's being targeted by the enemy team sniper. Psychop, who's legendary on the North American server, is now getting mad props from the presenters for the insane comeback. His performance grabs attention and the chat of spectators goes wild. During a showdown, Duyan bolts to find a higher spot. But now it's him who's almost taken out because on Team 2, the player Benny is acting as a sniper. But in his mind, he thinks he needs to find a place to hide first. In any case, Duyan, now knowing his opponent's location, aims and shoots, hitting Benny with pinpoint accuracy from far away, which takes him out. The presenters say someone's got to close the gap to take out the hero. But that's what a sniper should prevent, and a king of his class definitely won't mess up. After responding, Benny gives up being a sniper, but the girls know this will put them in a tight spot. Xander then yells that they just need to push the protagonist away, but the truth is he's been targeted, too. So, the two start some kind of internal beef from getting eliminated by the boy. Despite this, even without saying anything, the leader sends the message that it's not the time to squabble. With only 2 minutes left, Spellboy shouts that the protagonist is their pride and believes more pets will want to snipe now. Sue yells from a distance, asking what the boy's accuracy rate is, and he replies, it's 53%. Then, Nam gets so hyped he can't help but grin. Back to Duan, he thinks Miho must be plotting something sneaky. He can totally pop up as a duelist and go after the protagonist. Surprise, surprise. That's exactly what's happening. So, the hero tries to keep it cool. But thanks to his insane skills, the opponent dodges and jumps right at him, almost like he's reading his mind. In this moment, the protagonist tries to block out all the distractions to stay focused. With that, he lands a hit on the enemy and switches it up for a physical attack. But plot twist, that's his worst move, and he gets totally pressured in the clash. The protagonist feels panic rising as a weapon stuck in his thigh starts zapping him. Finally, with the enemy right in front, he has no time to think and fires his last shot in a split second. The next day at school, chaos erupts when one of the big players from yesterday shows up. A bunch of students swarm Suwa to chat about the championship they saw, and he thanks them for the love. Everyone claims they tuned in because of him, and when asked, the blonde says he's now tight with Jay. Of course, they start talking about the player named Psychop, sending chills down the hero's spine. Everyone says he was a total beast, and the blonde casually mentions he's also become buddies with him. But the real talk is about how unlucky they were at the end of the match. Later, Suwa tells the protagonist about the crazy effects of extreme visibility. And on top of that, he brings up their bad luck, tripping up at the end when they could turn it around. For real, the blonde gets super annoyed. And just then, Juri, who stumbles upon them, looks pretty grumpy, too. As she walks off without a word, Suwa feels puzzled and asks the protagonist if he knows what's up. A while back, the girl asked how Duyan could play in the championship and totally caught onto the lie. Since then, she's been on edge, but Suwa knew she wasn't the easiest to handle. Still, he felt a bit bummed. So, putting that aside, he invites the protagonist to team up, which catches him off guard because flashback to post-game yesterday, Naman asked to chat with the protagonist alone. And in a twist of fate, he made the exact same offer that Sua just did. When Mans proposed it, he said the boy would crush it as a pro player. Even though he couldn't see himself like that, the chance to be on the same team was right there. And from his expression, Nam seemed stoked, expecting a yes, but the protagonist said no. He didn't think he was that good at the game, let alone dealing with people. So he apologized, bowing his head. In that moment, Nam freaked out and said he didn't need to rush it. So, even with the protagonist saying no, he asked him to just take a bit more time to think it over. Back to the present. Now Sulu is throwing the team proposal at him, putting him in a tough spot again. The blonde believes they can build a squad if they can snag 3 more players. And on the day of the first league, that's when they'll debut as pros. So he asks if the boy is in since he knows deep down he wants to go pro. And for some reason, this time the protagonist grins and accepts, making his buddy super happy. Suwa quickly remembers they need to brainstorm about the team and pick a name. Plus, he's pumped to start hunting for the other members. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city inside a certain building, Miho gazes out at the view deep in thought. In the memories of yesterday, the two were on the brink of elimination from the damage they dealt each other. Duyan gritted his teeth and pulled out his sniper, zeroing in on Miho, who dodged in a flash. But with a quick flick of his mouse and lightning-fast reflexes, he managed to lock onto the enemy's head and before he could react, pulled the trigger, scoring another kill. By fate's misfortune, Duyan got hit too, leading to his elimination pretty quick. But Minho definitely didn't forget who lost first. Cutting through the serious vibes, Sarasu pops in saying she brought snacks. She asks if her crew is hungry, and one of them bolts to check out the goodies. A chill convo kicks off, but everyone's low-key focused on Nam still glued to the computer. The girl even asks what's up with him, so they start chatting about the failed recruitment. At that point, they only had 4 players on the squad, and even with a new dude, Eugene, finding solid players was tough. For real, Jay can't stop thinking that having the main character on board would be a game share. But then Sarah spittles that she heard the 2 guys he played with the other day are in his sister's class, which totally grabs his attention. Later that day, the famous sister hopes a relative doesn't pull any crazy stunts, especially since she knows he can be super loud. Anyway, Sugo mentions he scored some gear even without winning the cash prize. So, all they need is a computer and a monitor for the main character. Switching gears, Duan suggests inviting Spellboy to the team, and the blonde is all in. But a girl eavesdropping shows some suspicious curiosity. Back at the cyber cafe, they usually hit up. Sugo jokes that the girl really loves this game since Juri got there before them. Anyway, the girl asks to play together, and for the first time he grins and agrees. Plus, since she says her parents let her chill there, the blonde thinks they're pretty cool. But she can't play at home because of her PC's quality. And even now, she's still annoyed with the main character. Suddenly, the blonde's phone buzzes with his sister's number. Feeling something's off, he figures she's hurt and needs him to bounce ass out. So, he says they'll talk later, and Duyan hopes it's nothing serious. Inevitably, his eyes lock with the girl's. He starts to sweat because he doesn't want to look away, but she drops the tough act, and she calls him out, asking if he's still down to play since they had already agreed. To clear things up, she asks about his ranking. So, he sees no harm in revealing he's number 300 on the North American server. Juri feels humiliated like a hyena that tried to mess with the lion, and Duan's already hit Grandmaster ranking on the Korean account. So she thinks if she were as good as him, she could roll with Suho. Not knowing how to kick off a convo, Duyan asks if she plays other games. And when the girl says no, she insists that the master ranking is already something to flex about. From her face is clear Juri wasn't expecting the compliment. So she shares that she started in silver and grinded hard. With excitement, she spills how much she hustled solo, but doesn't go on long without putting herself down. Juri explains she plays other roles, too, but her fave is the healer. After all, if she heals the main character, he can totally wreck everything for her, which seems to vibe with both of them. At the end of that gaming session, Juri leaves this cyber cafe feeling proud, but suddenly gets a photo on her phone that makes her freeze. The pic was of her taken from behind her own self at that exact moment, which couldn't be more creepy. To explain this, a dude shows up saying he snooped through her social media to find out where she studied. Plus, he says with his hands on her shoulders that he warned her he'd come, but she didn't see it. Then this guy laughs and casually mentions he's Battle, the player who chatted with her in the lobby of the last game. Obviously, her instinct is to shake off his hands and freak out from all this weirdness. Battle, on the other hand, apologizes for scaring her, but blames her for not replying. Still shaking, Juri asks why he's doing this, but the guy blushes like he's caught, and he reaches out to pet her, only to get totally rejected. Switching topics, he mentions he hasn't eaten and reminds her she said she'd pay for dinner. Even though she doesn't remember this, he keeps rambling this time about her looking cuter in the pics. Then Juri just feels more and more uncomfortable until he grabs her hand, crossing all kinds of lines. The stalker resorts to force to get the dinner he craves. And unfortunately, realizing he doesn't have enough strength to leave, Juri starts to cry. In a quick step before things get messy, a light at the end of the tunnel pops up for the girl. Duan shouts without a second thought for the dude to take his hands off her. He claims to be a precious friend, but feeling that strong grip, Battle takes a step back. The hero quickly asks who this guy is and explains he came to return the gloss she forgot. The two swap info while the weirdo just stands there staring at the students. So before anything worse goes down, the girl grabs the protagonist's hand and pulls him to run, leaving the frustrated stalker standing in the middle of the street. After a mad dash, the girl explains that running was the best move, because since it wasn't the first time, at least this time, she managed to record the whole scene. Realizing that weirdos don't get how criminal their actions are, Juri takes precautions. She explains that there were times when some sketchy guys were into her. But even after all that, she refuses to let the hero take her home. In the end, she admits she was just scared and thanks him, thinking she had some blame in it. The next day at school, Sua asks if the boy is free on Saturday. The protagonist is he is, so Sua spills that's when they'll meet Spellboy. Since he has a voice that doesn't match his body, the protagonist is curious to see how that'll go. Anyway, Sua mentions Kine will also show up, even though he's already got a team, and Duyan's curious, too. The plan is to grab some food and chat while gaming a bit. Then, Juri pops up, inviting herself to join. She overheard the two talking about forming a pro team and being super cute. She says she'd totally play, but Sua makes it clear the requirement is to be at least a grandmaster. Fury tries to say she's super close, but that doesn't convince anyone, so she switches gears and asks for the manager spot. Honestly, they really need a manager to handle the team's stuff and recordings. So, Sugo says he'll think about it, but warns he's heading out again to see his sister because of the drama from the other day. After he leaves, Duan turns around feeling something's off and finds Juri looking furious. When asked about the stalker from the other day, the girl says she blocked him, but Duyan isn't satisfied with that. Clearly, she's worried and starts to say something. But just then, Sua comes running back, shouting the hero's name. While Juri thinks he's jealous, Duan's in full panic mode. He grabs Duyan by the shoulders and starts apologizing non-stop, but Sua clarifies that Duyan's not the problem. It's the gamer community. In a forum called 10 Reasons Why Psycop is a hack user, some internet troll went public to spread hate, claiming he got headshot after a 180 turn. Little by little, what was becoming a fact in the community was reaching his friends. But Duran still can't wrap her head around what they mean by that. Maybe because she's innocent. The girl doesn't get what these so-called hacks are. She asks if it's the same thing nerds do when they hack computers. Then the blonde explains that what's being discussed are aim assist programs for players and that they basically do all the work for him because with just a click, 100% accuracy is guaranteed. Once again, with pure innocence, the girl gets hyped to use it too. However, the blonde makes sure to explain the cheating rules in games. Finally, Juri gets the problem and asks if the hero got caught, which he obviously denies. Sue even asks if she's joking because he's sure the protagonist is the definition of alleged player. Duum starts scrolling through those nasty messages on her phone. But the one who gets mad is the blonde fed up with the jealousy of others, and he says it'll fix this for the team's honor. With the self-proclaimed queen of gossip, Juri insists that rash decisions only make things worse and that it'd be better for the person involved to explain themselves in person, but it's natural for him to worry about Duan's situation. Getting back to the point, Suko first asks if the boy is okay. He says he's not too worried, but a bit embarrassed they're talking about him. However, there's nothing to stress about since he wasn't using hacks. Still, the blonde thinks this could mess with others like Swabot or the team. Then, the main character thinks it's wild how many people are buzzing about him. Out of nowhere, he spots something and nudges the blonde to check it out, too. Duan's hands are shaking while he's clutching his phone, and it clicks when one of the comments about hacking looks like it's from Juri. Not long after, in a private room, a seriously intense person connects with the two boys. She straight up asks if the gossip is saying the protagonist doesn't use anything. The blonde jumps in saying Duyan is just naturally talented. In that moment, this person gives off a dark vibe, making the boys feel pretty uneasy. But then, revealing herself as Swebit. The streamer says it's a golden opportunity, which totally blows the boys' minds. Since the day before, rumors about the protagonist using hacks have been flying around. In the recorded live stream, after watching a bunch of times, everyone agreed there was some cheating going on. With that consensus, a whole community of commenters joined in. So Swagabot decides to help the protagonist clear things up. For that, they need to hit up his studio. But since the hero is still confused, Swaga asks if he doesn't want to set the record straight. Suwa jumps in for him, saying they need to squash this gossip at the source. And how's he going to do that? By showing he can play without hacks. Obviously, for the streamer, the protagonist gameplay will speak for itself, and to the blonde's excitement, he gets to join in. Still, our hero is stressing that he really can't pull it off. At first, his friends are curious about what he means, but Duan just yells that he won't explain anything and bails from the lobby, leaving the streamer feeling like he messed up and the blonde unable to clarify anything. That night at home before crashing, the protagonist thinks he needs to explain somehow, but he can't. And when he grabs his phone, he sees a message. Swimboat says he doesn't have to show up if he doesn't want to, but insists he can't let this slide. Duan, on the flip side, thinks it's better to let it go because he doubts it'll matter and is more worried about Jury. But when he shuts his eyes, the words about being a hacker echo in his mind again. All those nasty comments, calling the protagonist a loser and hurling hate, feel way too real, and the anxiety in his chest grew so much that sleeping became a struggle. Unfortunately, the next day his assumption was totally off because while strolling through the hallways, everyone was buzzing about the hacking rumor. Some said people like him should be kicked out while others were laughing and calling him a fraud for being treated like someone important by Jay. His name kept popping up, and for Duyan, it definitely wasn't better than proving himself live. On the walk home, the player's sister questions what she's hearing. Apparently, Sarah wanted her to spy on the protagonist to get the scoop. And since the girl got annoyed, it was said her allowance would be cut if she didn't. So, she had no choice but to follow her older sister's orders. In the background, Jury walks with a tired look, thinking the weekend is still ages away until she bumps into Sugo. Of course, she does her best to hide that exhausted face and greets the blonde as cheerfully as possible. Jury asks if he wants to catch a movie on Saturday, but as usual, he declines, saying he has plans. In that case, she asked if he's free on Sunday, but Suwa says he doesn't have anything he wants to watch and can't play because his sister is sick. Jury gets annoyed by the concert rejection, but reminds him there's something she needs to ask. He mourns that he wants to know something, but the girl rushes him off and calls Duyan over, changing the subject. This makes the protagonist realize he's being used and start to feel anxious. Sophie is worried about the hero's state, so he mentions that he hasn't been able to rest properly. With all these issues, the blonde doesn't even know where to start. In classroom 6 of the first year, some students are venting about a troll in the match they played. But what everyone's really talking about is the queen bee of the Seabon blob probably being at this school. A girl asks who it is. Then the boy spills that it's the one and only Jury, the pretty girl in class, because both her name and the school popped up in the blog's data. The question was why she was being targeted again, but apparently it was for having seduced someone to boost her ranking. The message left for Queen Bee, or Flower Jury, which was her nickname, spilled the tea on her first quick match with this dude. They hopped into the voice chat and started gaming together. And as time flew by, they got super close. He was a master rank while Jury was chilling in silver, always saying how much she wanted to level up. So being all smitten, the guy helped her grind until she hit Master 2. Then they planned to meet up to celebrate. But right before that, Jury coasted him on all social media and vanished. A bit later, the guy tracked her down. But surprised, she had a boyfriend. And to keep new victims at bay, her ID got leaked. Naturally, this drama stirred up some serious outrage over Jury's icy behavior towards the guy. Despite her cute face, the whole school pretty much agreed she was not a nice person. So when a student named Heimina walked into the classroom, they quickly pulled her over. They spilled the whole story, leaving her shook, especially when she realized Queen Bee was the Jury Yun she knew. Since Heimina went to elementary school with her, they asked her about Jury's vibe. Still kind of hesitant, she apologized, saying it's not cool to talk trash about people who aren't around. With Suwa always lurking nearby, the students thought he might be the next target. And even though Heimina insisted Jury wouldn't do something shady, everyone was already convinced. Anyway, when she turned away, that sad look on her face totally crumbled because without even getting involved, she had already planted some serious doubt in her classmates' minds. Later, Suwa mentioned that Jay said to find Spellboy first since he would be late. So, the hero got it, and from his face, it was clear he was still feeling the heat from the comments. Anyway, they waited for Spellboy to show up until suddenly a sticker message popped up. So, it said he was heading to the bathroom, leaving the hero solo to greet the new guy. After a few more seconds, a message buzzed on his phone saying he was there. Duyan looked around trying to spot Spellboy. He could be either a bearded dude to his right or an Asian guy to his left. Or maybe he was just passing by. So Duan thought he should do something to stand out. But while he was lost in thought, someone asked if he was talking to Aegis or Psychop. Turns out, this stunning dude in front of him was the player known as Spellboy. The protagonist almost fainted from the shock of reality before he could even respond. And hearing them call each other those weird names made some people walk by and laugh. They weren't wrong since it was a gaming identity. But shifting gears, Duan really didn't expect someone so chill to have such a deep voice. Honestly, he didn't expect Spellboy to be this good looking. Later, while some food was being whipped up, they mentioned the player was 21 and in college. Duan couldn't stop thinking about how cool he was from his looks to his voice, but then Suah straight up asked why he was way friendlier in the game than in real life, which made Spellboy freeze up. He tried to apologize, saying it was his first time meeting online friends and started acting like he did in the game. But it felt super awkward. Honestly, the guy admitted that not having any friends, he didn't know how to handle this kind of vibe because in reality, he had this chill personality. But in the game, he was a total chatterbox with tons of friends and zero fear. Anyway, and they asked if he still wanted to join the team. And the guy said yes after all. He wanted to do his best to repay them and Swagbot, who pulled him out of a lonely time. But first, he warned that he needed to get close to Duan to see if he was really a hacker or not. In the game, a one-on-one match with 10 rounds was about to kick off. And even though the protagonist was a bit shy, Spellboy wasn't much different. Despite the guy's hands shaking in the game, he played his role as a provocative chatterbox. Then Sue got hacked to see what would go down and declared the start of the match. Right from the jump, Spellboy loaded his weapon and dashed to see if his buddy was really good. But just as he was about to keep trash talking, he got shot right in the head, cutting off all that smack, making him drop to his knees. Then Spellboy, who had already played with legends in ranked matches, faced a whole new level of insane skill. After the match wraps up, the vibe gets super tense and the main dude is totally freaking out. Out of nowhere, Spellboy pops up, accusing him and demanding he switch computers. Swan tries to chill everyone out, but then another guy jumps in, saying they didn't even have time to set up any hacks. This dude tells Spellboy to recognize talent when he sees it. And of course, the boys are all kinds of confused by this guy. Sue steps in, explaining it's kind, but that just makes things even weirder. Anyway, Kenai notices Spellboy acting different, so the blonde spills about his shyness. Now chatting with Duyan, the ranker is hyped about the skills he just witnessed. While the hero is still trying to process everything, he introduces himself by his real name, which makes K9 want a one-on-one match, too. Spellboy is itching to bounce from the chair. But what really throws Duyan off is seeing the team's tank, for some reason, in tears. K9 instantly gets worried about being judged for making a teammate cry, but Spellboy's words hit hard, revealing he feels bad for not knowing why Duan hides his skills from everyone. At first, the main dude is lost, and the others are just as confused. Sujo jumps in, saying he's kind of like Spellboy, all introverted and stuff. A month ago, he couldn't even share his thoughts, but he's made some serious progress. Spellboy suggests recording a hand cam without showing his face to tackle this issue, but K9 laughs it off, saying those who call the main dude a hacker won't buy that. Still, that bad vibe lingers in Spellboy, especially knowing how many people are trashing Swagbot. But apparently, Duyan had no clue about all that, being the one who blew up the hacker rumors the streamer was getting roasted. Sugo, meanwhile, calls the main dude the biggest victim, but Spellboy clarifies that everyone's getting flamed. And when Duyan tries to confirm while K9 looks down, Suah says it's not as bad as it seems. Anyway, about the team there. Forming, Spellboy asks if it's for competition or not, because competitions are where they'll be facing a ton of people. So he's not joining unless Duyan publicly takes back what he said first. Later that night, the main dude starts stressing about having to show up in the competition. Thinking about his friends getting judged makes him sad and super reflective. But that thought gets interrupted when a loud angry bark nearly makes him faint. The angry barker, just a tiny dog. And guess what? Its owner is Juri, who's out for a stroll. Even though Rose is only 9, she's still a little menace. Anyway, she asks why Duan isn't with Suah, and if something's bothering him, especially since he usually seems way more hyped than the mopey look he's got now. Duyan spittles it, saying people are suffering because of him, but he's still scared of being judged. Even so, Juri points out that if he leaves things as they are, they'll just get worse, which funny enough is exactly what the streamer said earlier. To cheer him up, she shows him the hate she's getting in the class group. But since the main dude wasn't even invited, she had to add him in first. Anyway, she quickly asks if Duyan thinks all the trash talk about him is true. But even if they both agree it's not, she knows no one will believe it. Juri mentions she's always been the center of gossip, but has never done anything wrong. One day, it all kicked off when some girl dumped her boyfriend because he liked Juri more. But that wasn't her fault. This time, she explains that the gossip is about Sugo being the target. And the funniest part, the blonde has never even played a ranked match with her. Normally, Juri just ignores this stuff, but Suah is someone who really loves the game and dreams of going pro. So, to protect his future, Juri says she'll make a statement, and she tells the main dude to wait and see before deciding what to do. This leaves him even more reflective until the plot shifts to a screen starting a live broadcast. When Swabuk goes live, a computer installing the operating system pops up. So, at first, the viewers are curious and they switch topics, asking if there's going to be a giveaway in today's stream. With everything going down, the chat thinks Swabot owes them an explanation, and some start to roast him, saying the hacker streamer is about to pop up. The nervous crowd is throwing shade, as expected, until the Windows install wraps up live and Swabot can finally flash a grin at his viewers. First thing he does with the OS back in action is download the game CZ Bond. Then some folks start thinking he coped a new rig and is doing an unboxing. Anyway, the streamer breaks the awkward silence and starts to spill the tea. Since the tournament, everyone's been buzzing about a certain player, possibly using hacks in front of the whole squad. A bunch of them wanted an official statement, but he's been keeping it on the down low to guard his privacy. But these rumors have stirred up drama, not just among players, but also the whole community. So, the accused player asked for this chance to clear the air on all the accusations. As they saw, the stream showed the OS install from scratch. They verified that no shady programs were installed besides the game. So, Suba claims this is the perfect moment to squash those nasty rumors. Without wasting time, while the player in question gets a warm welcome, Duian remembers what jury said about doing it right. So, all the haters get silenced with his skills. Just like that, Psychop is invited and actually shows up, but he's shaking and rocking a mask that sends the chat into a frenzy. Before they kick things off, Suba asks him to introduce himself, and the kid does, leaving everyone stunned by how young he looks. To clear things up, Duian drops that he's only 16, and the streamer says he respects him for his bravery. From the tired look on the kid's face, it's clear the rumors have been a total nightmare. And Duan confirms, shaking, saying he's had some wild nightmares at night. He really wants to bounce home. And the viewers feel a bit of sympathy. Anyway, with his hands on the kid's shoulders, the streamer tells the audience that Psychop deals with panic attacks. He tries to tell him not to stress, which makes the kid blush, but also fired up to show what he's got. When asked why he switched gears, Duan says he doesn't want to hurt anyone. So, if he makes it clear, he's going to prove his skills are legit. And to back that up, the streamer says he'll be there for support during the stream. To prove they're live, Sug shows a clip of the day's news. Then, he asks the kid to hop on the computer where they just installed the game. Without wasting a second, the kid steps up and mentally apologizes to Suvo for not acting sooner. Plus, he thanks the blonde for believing in his innocence. While setting up the game, a quick recap about it is given, covering his ranking on the other server and his experience as a master rank and the fact that he's already at Grandmaster level. And Squadbot quickly mentions a ranked match is about to kick off. To their surprise, when he pulls a match, they see 3 legendary players on the enemy team. But the kid says he's all good, and this chill vibe has the viewers curious. When he jumps into the game, he asks to be a sniper, and no one complains, especially since he's lucky to land on a team of fans. Then with his weapon ready, he gears up, and the enemy Abyss says he's hyped to see this live. Another opponent steps up for the class because they want to test him, and Abby reminds them to check the replay because if he really is a hacker, this will be his downfall. When the match kicks off, everyone focuses on the kid who's in an open field on the other side. Imbies claims to be the tank and says he'll go first because he can take 2 hits. But the kid jumps over a building and gets a sweet vantage point. As a sniper, he locks onto his target and in less than a millisecond adjusts the mouse for a perfect shot. Even though he gets hit, the enemy still has no clue where it came from. And in the meantime, he reloads, leaving room for another shot, which makes both Sugo and Squabit beam with pride. Unlike Sander, who's watching the stream with a disgusted look on his face. After that shot, the vibe of the viewers flits from day to day. Abyss can't believe he got taken out without any hacks. As he's about to respond, he decides to check the replay camera, but this just leaves him even more shook because it's obvious it was all about aim as the protagonist smacked his head and every other body part. He basically hit in a circle, which totally earned him the title of psychopath. Aim assists usually have a pattern to hit the chest or head. So, it's safe to say Duan did it on purpose to flex a bit. While that dude's thinking, another enemy gets wrecked by the hero and a girl named Hover is totally impressed. Suvo and Swagbot are feeling that pride, but more like fans watching their idol. Even from their homes, that vibe spreads, creating a whole collective hype. At first, Duian seemed like a total fraud when he showed up, but now he's way cooler. All the hate comments got swapped out for compliments from basic to super fancy. Anyway, after showing off his skills, Duian takes off the headset and asks if that's enough, and the whole chat is liking up. Swaggit jumps in to say yes, way more than enough. As you can see, the boy's stats were on par with the pros. And since it was all professionals, he had a slight edge. Even after proving himself, he shot an email to the game support center, and the admins confirmed they found 0 history of cheating. In the end, Duran's just a kid who loves the game. So he asks his viewers to chill with the rumors. From his home, Spellboy can hold back tears seeing how nice the streamer is. Curry feels proud, and there's no one left to throw shade at him. Even Duan thinks about Swadbud's support and feels all warm and fuzzy inside. At night, the two say what's up, and Swabot claims he'll buy Duan a drink when he's older. Since the boy mentioned using an old monitor, he also got a new one as a gift, which the streamer made sure to give him, especially since it was just collecting dust. Suddenly, a person pops up asking what the protagonist is doing there. This catches both boys' attention, especially since it's a girl they've never seen before. But even though they don't know her, that doesn't stop Swagbot from thinking she's super cute. Then, as she introduces herself as the protagonist's sister, the streamer explains everything as maxly as possible, which makes the sister bend down too since he gave Duan a gift. The next day, the rumors flip from hate to compliments. And as everyone's saying his name, Duan's shaking so much it worries his friends, especially since his face is so red, it looks like it's about to blow up. All these people saying his name made him anxious, but maybe in a good way. Anyway, Sua remembers Juri has some stuff to sort out, but from her scary expression, it seems everything's cool. Later, now that Spellbow is on the team, the group chats about needing 2 more players. For now, they need a support, but Suho isn't ruling out taking that spot himself. As for Duyan, obviously, he's the main attacker, so they need a secondary and a solid support. And while Su crossed Juri off the list for one of the spots, someone popped up happily in the background and called Duyan, saying it was a pleasure to meet him, especially since knowing Sua was ages, it made sense to think Duyan was Psychop. Of course, the boys act clueless since they can't figure out how this random girl knows. Juri on her part is more worried that she might have a crush on Suho. But back in Duyan's head, he's still shocked that someone knows his identity. And more than that, he's trying to figure out who this person could be. Juri's suspicious look clashes with the proud expression of this still unknown girl. As Juri gets super hyped, Sua has to stop her from doing anything wild. The other girl finds it a bit weird how everyone's acting so strange. Anyway, the protagonist asks who she is, and then the girl asks him to guess. She drops a hint that they've met once in the game before. However, even though nothing comes to mind at first, Suwa asks if she could be Binning, and boom. That's the right answer. The boys ask if she's a senior in school, and when she confirms, the girl says it's a pleasure to meet them. A few seconds later, the protagonist finally connects the dots, remembering her character, Binny from Team 2. Sugo quickly asks how she knew the boy's identity. Then, the girl explains that since she already knew the blondes, and Xander kept saying that Duyan was a total legend, it was easy to make the connection. Honestly, Binny says she had known for ages. She had seen the two at the cyber cafe chatting about bringing Spellboy into the squad. Anyway, the protagonist asks why she's here, and the girl replies that she just wanted to say hi. To introduce themselves, they say they're Davin Park while Duyan does the same. Switching gears, Shugul practically yells the girl's name in a panic. He quickly asks if she has a team for the C-Bond yet, because if not, he wants to invite her to join their crew. After all, since she's a legendary rank player, she must be aiming for the pro scene, but Juri is not vibing with that at all. Back in class a bit later, the 4 names of the team members are scribbled on a piece of paper. To wrap it up, Suwa has one more person in mind. But the biggest dilemma is what to call themselves. That is until Jurid pops up in front of his desk, snatches the pencil, and suddenly writes her player name under Benny's. Sua asks her to erase it, but practically in tears, the girl insists she needs to join the squad. As she said before, she's cool with being just a manager, but super annoyed that he invited another girl. She asked why she can't play, too. Sua didn't realize how much she wanted in. So he explains the responsibilities of being a pro. But since she decided to commit to the manager role, he figured it was chill to add her name, too. So, Suwa asks if she wants to be the group's manager, and without a second thought, Juri jumps at it, throwing herself onto the blonde as a thank you. In the end, this made both of them happy, even if for totally different reasons. Later, in a private group with just the members, everyone's saying what's up. Spellboy kicks things off by saying he loves Duyan so much that he'll only support him. Finally, Subwa tells them that besides not having a full team yet, they're also without sponsors, but he promises he knows where to score some so they can compete in the first league. Back at that pro player's house, one of them in particular is feeling pretty down. Nam is bummed thinking that Psychop joined another pro team, even after saying he wouldn't. The crew gets Jay's side, especially since Duyan said he wasn't interested in going pro. Then, one of them says he'll offer the spot again, and time flies until by late afternoon, the protagonist is scrolling through Sua's messages. Everyone in the group seems super hyped about the team's future and plans to play that night. So, Duan feels really good about having a team now. But just as he's almost home, Miho shows up calling him by his nickname. And as the protagonist instinctively turns around, their eyes meet. Duan doesn't know the player's face yet, but Miho can tell he found the right guy. Still, the protagonist recognizes something in the voice, and having seen a similar pic on Name's team, finally connects his character in the game with the real-life look, realizing it's Minho. Even so, the hero still doesn't know why he's here since the guy keeps staring at the picture on his phone. Duyan quickly asks if the boy lives nearby, but he says no and explains he's just there to ask for something. At that moment, the natural response is to ask what it is, but what the boy didn't expect was to be invited to Minho's team. On a sea and map with a beach vibe, a pink energy gathers in an enemy's hand, and from his spot, he seems to be hunting for some victims. Benny is hiding in a corner, and beside her is Spellboy ready to roll. Then, as the tank activates his true form and charges in, the DPS covers him from behind with a flurry of shots, which in the end gets wrapped up with just one hit from Spellboy. Still, the battle isn't over because another enemy charges from behind. But this one meets a worse fate as from the top of the beach observatory, Duan takes him out without mercy. With another win, Suo praises the team, saying they're working together like pros. Benny gives Spellboy props for being a human shield, and even gives his head a little pat. This makes the girl super pumped to keep going, while Spellboy's face turns as red as a tomato. He tries to say he's way older than her, but she doesn't care. Shifting focus, Sua doesn't continue as excitedly, because he notices Duyan's expression is a bit off. Being his colleague, the blonde is going to ask about this behavior that's way more distracted than usual. Then the protagonist says sorry if he messed up the game, promising he'll do better. But Suvo insists that Duyan is doing great, and still that doesn't seem to change anything. By the way, the blonde remembers Jay mentioning the hero the other day, sounding like he just got dumped. So, after thinking it over, the protagonist decides to spill the tea, which of course leaves his friend shook after hearing everything. Honestly, it makes total sense for Duyan to be number one on their recruitment list. And he's even more mind be blown when he realizes something else. He shakes the protagonist, and he could gone pro. But Duyan shows zero signs of regret, which totally surprises Sugo because in the end, Duyan chose to be on their team, and that fired him up to do his best. Even though deep down, the protagonist still felt kind of bad for turning down Nam and Minho. Flashback to that meeting when he was offered a chance to join the team. Duan was super confused. First Jay hit him up with a proposal, and now Minho was trying to recruit him too, but he made it clear he wasn't joining, which totally caught the pro off guard. When Duyan didn't get a response, he tried to grab Minho's attention, but the dude was lost in thought since he got rejected on the spot. In the player's mind, the protagonist turned down Nam because it was too sudden and he didn't know much about the scene. But since he joined another team, he probably knew what being pro meant. Still, having tossed that chance away, Minho thought he needed to sweeten the deal with cash. When asked, the protagonist said he only knew a little about their team. Among the things he knows is that one of the members is Yuji, who's a total beast at agility. He knows Eugene Cha is a new player, but adapts like a champ, keeping the team steady. And of course, he knows Nam, who usually plays support and is a legend in various positions. Plus, he's got the 411 on Minho's own counter and tank skills. That said, the guy warned that he's ranked first on the Korean server, something the protagonist apparently didn't know until that moment. He said this deflects how strong they were to back up the proposal. Plus, they had their own dorm for the members, and the payment would be discussed. But even with all these perks, the protagonist's face showed a new vibe for Minho. Back to Duan's refusal, the guy asked if the boys' current team was really just a bunch of friends. And when he confirmed, Minho chuckled at this whole let's play for fun vibe. Even though he knew how hype it could be to set big goals with friends, he said they'd never go pro. At that moment, sure that Duyan didn't want to go pro, Miho decided to drop it. But if his real goal was to snag first place, he made it clear that Duyan would regret this moment. With those harsh words, he turned and bounced, leaving the protagonist feeling a chill. Moments later, while waiting for the elevator, Sarah found herself daydreaming about dinner. Plus, she wanted to know where Miho was because she wanted to reschedule the stream and he had ghosted. Just when she thought about him, the guy popped up in front of her, apologizing and giving her a mini heart attack. Mo quickly spilled where he had been, which made her even more surprised. She was worried about pushing her sister to chase after the protagonist. So, she asked if he managed to find him just with that doodle. But more importantly, she asked how it went because she honestly wanted him on the team. Sarah was super hyped about this, but Mina said they should look for someone else. And to explain why, he assured her that even if he accepted, it would mess up the team since he wasn't ready yet. The next morning, Sua looked deep in thought. And while the protagonist focused on his hot coffee, Benny seemed the same. Breaking the silence, she said. She'd been pondering for a while and immediately asked why there were only 4 of them when they needed 5 for the team. Duan, for his part, was also deep in thought. So, the blonde warned that he wanted to chat about this, especially since they had some candidates in mind, and he had an idea of who to choose. Heading to the building of the pro players, Nam asked if he heard right. So, Sarah was all about making an announcement to find the last player for the squad, and Jay started freaking out, asking Miho what was up since he was acting all chill. He wanted to know why Miho didn't just recruit Duyan since they'd already met. He was super curious about what went down, but of course, the main dude was all nope again. Anyway, Mino kept pushing the idea that it's better to just forget about him because they could totally build a way better team if they snagged a 5th player. Sugo was vibing with that thought, and he started talking about the support he recommends. To give some context, the blonde said Benny probably played a few matches with him because he's none other than the legendary support Yummy. Of course, she remembered him because of the nickname and even hiked up his name. Benny thought it'd be a solid pickup since the guy does a great game, so he was down. As for the main dude's thoughts, he thought it'd be cool to play with him and was curious about how Yummy would roll. So, putting the details on hold, Sugol first warned that Yummy lives in another city. At a school with the motto of creativity, commitment, and ethics, students were cruising through the hallways. Everyone was buzzing about Fico, or Reaper, as he's known, being a total god at PC Bond. Ben Sander, in particular, got super annoyed and started kicking everything in sight. He made sure to say that Duyan isn't that great, and calling his classmates clueless, he threatened them that next time he'd wipe the floor with them. Then he stormed off without explaining why he was so mad. Still in the hallway, Xander couldn't stop thinking about how wrong these students were. He was fuming about this because even after losing to him, people kept hyping him up. Anyways, rage didn't last long because suddenly he noticed some important messages on his phone. And when he got a call, he had to pick up right away even though he already said he hates being contacted. Simonesht claimed to have news, but Xander shot back that he'd already seen it. The truth is he was also thinking about it because after waiting forever, his big chance popped up with the recruitment announcement from Mam's team. Sometime later in the game, Spellboy asked if it was true they were bringing Yummy onto the team. When Suwa said yes, the boy mentioned he played a few times with him. Then the blonde thought it'd be smart to jump into a game right away to test things out. So, they started by putting that strong candidate in the match. Back at school, Sarah figured out from her sister's info. YJ was so ticked off at Minnow. While the girl kept chatting, her sister insisted she wouldn't keep spying. Anyway, she just hung up on Sarah while a girl rushed past, and maybe not paying attention, she bumped into the girl, sending her tumbling backward. Hi Mina, who was the one who did this, stood right in front of her. But when Sarah's sister was about to complain, the blonde flopped on the ground and started whining, too, which was kind of hard to follow. Meanwhile, Yummy was about to have her first test match, and Duyan still looked shocked. By the way, the player's expression suddenly shifted. The main dude felt a chill run down his spine because contrary to what was said, she didn't seem nice at all. Taking charge among her teammates, Benny said, "Nice to see you again." And since Yumi didn't respond right away, Duyan started finding her more and more creepy until out of nowhere, the girl greeted everyone with a sweet smile, totally flipping Duyan's expectations. First, she thanked them for the invite and mentioned that even though she's a legend, she's had her ups and downs. Still, SUA recognized her as a key player, so Yummy said the same about Aegis. Anyway, the two kept chatting in a super friendly way, which made Duyan change his mind more and more, because all this vibe reminded him of the good times with Nam. Back to the convo, they agreed to play a match. But when she caught the main dude's gaze, she smiled in a way that was kind of intimidating. When the round kicked off, the item Frozen Fog was used. This is a calming effect that freezes an entire area, perfect for support. Yummy. Still, the look she had while doing this left Spellboy shaking in fear behind Benny. And the Scion went for the main dude who ducked behind Suvo. Anyway, when those expressions faded, she motivated them kindly, just like Nam. Behind the team's biggest tank, which is Spellboy, the duelists moved forward. Without wasting time, a player from the other team bolts solo to take out the tank. But Spellboy stands tall, ready to take the hit, and the squad rallies together. Out of nowhere, Yummy, who's lagging a bit, spots some weird movement nearby. That's enough to set off alarms, and she quickly warns the crew. A few seconds later, she yells, giving the main character a heads up to aim left. Just as he does, after a quick search, she spots a sneaky piece of something hiding behind a wall. With lightning speed and precision, Duan takes aim and fires, nailing the enemy right in the weak spot. As the enemy goes down, Yummy's face lights up with excitement. She praises our hero's skills, leaving him all blushy and flustered. Noticing Spellboy struggling after losing his transformation, she casts a healing spell that brings him back to full power in no time. So, while she doesn't replace Nam, she definitely holds her own. But then, Suwa starts taking some serious hits, and Yummy just tells him to fall back. Benny's locked on an opponent up high, but her aim goes off. Instead of throwing shade, Yummy cheers her on, saying, "It's all good and she'll get it next time." Finally, the whole team is totally under Yummy's spell. At the end of the game, they ask her to join the squad, and she's all in. Sugo starts rambling about going pro, but then realizes it's not even needed. Anyway, he heads off to celebrate while Yummy gives the main character a wave. When asked about the team name, Suwa jumps in with the suggestion he thought of. Without overthinking it, he throws out the name he thinks is the best. Back at school, when the girls bump into each other in the hallway, Hamana is acting all weird, leaving Sarah's sister super confused. To her, it looks like the girl totally mimicked her fall and went down right after. But the crowd that shows up later didn't see it, so they help her up, all concerned. Out of habit, the girl opens her mouth to apologize, but then Juri pulls her away. Juri thinks there's no reason to apologize when the girl's the one who fell. So even being nice, Hagmana can't help but look annoyed. As expected, her psychopathic friends back up the blonde's story. But Juri saw the whole thing and caught Hina throwing herself onto Bonnie. So, she asks why the blonde fell, too, which totally catches Win off guard. After a few seconds of awkward silence where everyone's trying to piece it together, Mina says she lost her balance, claiming Juri should have seen it from far away. She approaches with a sweet smile, asking if the other girl's okay, but Juri makes it clear she's got perfect vision. No issues here. Then switching gears, Mina says it's been a minute and asks how things are. This leaves Juri surprised enough to pause and look down a bit embarrassed. She shakes her head in confusion, showing she doesn't remember Mina even though they were classmates. Juri really doesn't seem to care much, but just in case, she says it's nice to see her again. In the end, even a blonde's friends are a bit mesmerized by Juri's vibe. Then Mina's true feelings bubble up and her fury shows. Anyway, Bonnie struggles to speak when she's cornered. So, being defended like that, she starts to admire Juri for real. Back in class, Juri hears about this yummy who snagged the last spot on the team. Since they want to practice more as a squad, Sugo asks for a practice match. Being the team manager, Juri jumps in to help without a second thought. As they say their goodbyes, Sugo asks when the schedule will be ready. At some point, after that convo, Juri types on her phone, but starts to freak out. She just realized Suwa told her to do something she has no clue about. The blonde mentioned arranging a scrim, but Juri has no idea it means practice match. The worst part, she can't ask Suwa since she's the manager. But just when things get tense, Bonnie shows up with a gift. To explain, she says it's her thank you for the other day, leaving Juri totally surprised by the gesture, especially since she doesn't even remember helping Bonnie with anything. And of course, this makes Bonnie's happy face drop completely. In screams, she warns about when she fell and got helped, but Juri brushes it off. And the girl says she's fine even though her hand's all messed up. Anyway, she spots Juri's phone with the search tab open and asks about scrim. Juri freaks out and yells for her not to peek in her phone, but Bonnie's still curious if it's about Kizzy Bond, which gives Juri a light bulb moment. So, without wasting a second, she grabs Bonnie's arm and practically drags her along. Bonnie's walking, thinking she messed up, and gets super anxious when Juri starts talking. But all she asks is if Bonnie knows what scrim means, and Bonnie quickly says it's a casual match. Suddenly, Juri's worried face lights up with excitement. Later, Bonnie explains that these matches happen before real tournaments, and Sid's searching for other terms is a no-go. She suggests typing Cyben scrim in the search bar. Finally, Juri finds scrimmage in the informal dictionary. Bonnie's like, I've never played, but I know what it means. Without dropping her sister's name, Juri asks how they can make this happen. To give some context, Bonnie spittles the beans about being a team manager, which accidentally connects her to Duyan and Bonnie's mind. Anyway, Juri's super serious about needing to sort this out, so Bonnie's all in. She decides to help with whatever it takes. Juri asks how they'll pull it off, but Bonnie clarifies she has a friend who's also a manager, and they swap numbers. But when she gets home, reality hits her hard, shattering her hopes. Bonnie asks her sister for help multiple times. She wants to know how to set up a scrim match, but Sarah's not having it, especially since Bonnie hung up on her last time while she was talking about that. Bonnie tries to apologize, but remembers she's already asked for a lot. Sarah thinks it's weird Bonnie's making such a specific request since she doesn't even play. So Bonnie has to admit she has a friend who's curious about it. And with that, Sarah agrees to help out of sheer curiosity. To kick things off, Sarah says they need a community first. She warns that info is key and mentions several sites on the topic. One site she highlights is all about CZ Bond. Bonnie's shocked to see Dwan as the cover story on the community site. It explains that you can schedule a scrim by sending an invite on the site, or just set it up more casually, like coordinating with friends. But Sarah insists there's a better way to do it, and that's through an app called Concord. Of course, Bonnie's clueless about the app and thinks the name is weird. Her sister explains it connects players via mic chat, but that just confuses Bonnie more since you can do that in the game. So Sarah clarifies that the app is way better and more convenient. In the chats, there are tons of discussions about scrim matches. And in the dedicated chat, over 200 people are connected. Sarah says teams looking for matches usually leave messages and are proactive. That's why she tells Bonnie to just drop the date and wait for a response, or if not, slide into DMs with the player's private contacts. With that sorted, Sarah says she'll invite Bonnie to the group, but not really paying attention. Bonnie says it's not for her, realizing too late. From Sarah's face, it's clear she might figure out it's about Duyan, which is true because Bonnie knows it's about Aegis' team, now her rival. And Sarah is the one who benefits getting a chance to see them play, but still unsure and shaking to keep the secret. Bonnie just asks to join the group. The next day, Juri's on cloud 9 since the problem's all sorted. She thanks Bonnie, who says she's down to help more in the future. Juri asks to be taught, but acting like a double agent, Bonnie says a friend did it for her. In the end, after thinking it over, Juri offers Bonnie a manager position, too. To keep things clear, Bonnie will handle scheduling while Juri takes care of the rest. After all, it's way easier to ask for help when both are managers. Juri's all about this because she wants to learn from her friend, and to really sell it. She makes her face look as cute as possible, pressing Bonnie against the wall as those big baby eyes shine brighter and brighter, reaching a point where the girl can only say yes with a grin on her face. Later in an open field at school, the girls run into the boys from the team. Juri jumps in to introduce the new team. Manager hired by her since she's got mad resources. Which, yeah, is true, but Bonnie's still shaken with anxiety as she introduces herself. Sue's a bit lost, thinking no one knows who the main character is, so he asks for his opinion by saying yes right away. The blonde also gets on board and introduces himself to Bonnie, who's totally zoned out. Giving the 411 on the team, the blonde warns they're going to go pro ASAP. He mentions he's one of the tanks, introduces Duyan as the damage dealer, and presents Juri as the team manager. All this is to get into the official competition scene as a pro team. For a sec, Bonnie's starstruck until she realizes the weight of that goal, making her introduce herself as the manager will handle the scrim matches. Seconds after introducing herself, the girl tells the protagonist something he apparently didn't know. But honestly, what's really on his mind is how his sister would freak if she found out he's a manager on Duyan's team. Suvo, meanwhile, asks for Bonnie's ID to get to know each other better in the game later, but she's got nothing. Anyway, at some point later, a chip recharge gets done, but out of the three behind this, only Juri seems hyped. Juri asks how the protagonist feels with two cuties walking beside him. Sugo couldn't come while Bonnie's seriously pondering who the second cutie is. Still, they got to help the new manager set up an account, and ironically, this task lands on Duyan, who ends up in the wrong server. Because he's clueless, too. In the end, Juri finds the whole thing hilarious, but then gets serious since she's got a big issue to tackle. Heading to Sua's house, he asks if his sister needs anything else. And even though they live in the same mansion, he tells her to call since he'll be busy playing a bit with his team. But after the blonde leaves, the sister grabs a book and starts mumbling complaints while reading. When everyone hops into the game through an invite, Juri, being the first to chat, says she wants to create a skin for the team. Next up is Bonnie, whose nickname is Soybean. The girl's bangs look longer, but not just that. Her whole character is reimagined. When she meets Juri, she's blown away by how cute her character is, but Juri says the same. This was the perfect moment for the manager to flex how much cash she dropped. But she doesn't keep bragging since Bonnie's weird way of moving is too distracting. The second manager yells that her screen is spinning nonstop. Even though she's seen it a million times, this is her first time dealing with the controls. Then, after a bit, she stops completely dizzy. To help out, Juri tells her to focus on her left hand. Since it's a game with familiar keys, she warns Bonnie to rest her hand on the WD keys. And with her pinky, she should always keep it on the shift key. As for the spinning screen, Juri explains how to change the mouse sensitivity with the scroll button. So, after a few seconds of learning, Bonnie's already showing some decent skills. Even though she's still struggling, she starts to get the hang of it. And now the other two group members pop up. Juri quickly asks them to join the voice chat, and if they were playing, due to which Benny replies yes, claiming he carried, sparking a mini argument between the two. Anyway, everyone starts chatting about ranked matches, leaving Bonnie feeling a bit left out. Then she starts getting more anxious, but Duyan saves the day by putting a headset on her. While Bonnie figures out how it works, Benny keeps teasing Spellboy. That's when he finally gets fed up and delivers a perfect flying kick. But even so, Benny doesn't regret it since annoying the boy is just too fun. Suddenly, Benny spots a new face and the manager introduces herself. As Spellboy hypes up the girl's voice, Benny instantly calls him a creep. This gets him super mad at her again since he didn't say anything weird. Juri, meanwhile, warns that the girl knows a ton about the game, but hasn't played much. When Spellboy can't wrap his head around that, Benny breaks it down that some folks just know the theory. Sue jumps into the match, too. But while they're chilling in a warm-up round, Juri suggests letting Bonnie just watch. Yummy isn't there yet, but they're already scouting for the match, and Bonnie thinks it's awesome to hear everyone through the headset. For the game mode, the main character suggests a 3-on-3, but Bonnie keeps daydreaming about playing with a buddy at home and another one who's far away, and she's totally vibing with all of this. At the end of the day, Bonnie spittles all her feels even though she just watched. Finally, she remembers she needs to find a friend nearby and waves goodbye with a big smile. So, the girl tracks her down and Juri calls Dion to head home together. But on the way, something pops into the protagonist's mind that grabs his friend's attention. Even though he was the one who called her, he still couldn't get the words out. So, unable to handle the suspense, Juri tells him to just say it already. But just from the boy's face, a girl figures out what's up. She asks if Duan saw her monitor, and since he doesn't answer, it's obvious he did. As expected, there was a lot of disrespect there, probably thanks to that suitor since they now knew his nickname. Even without knowing them, juniors and seniors from school were throwing shade like she's cute for A, and Duyan could feel the weight of those words for her. But Juri insists he shouldn't sweat it after all their friends. She really tells him not to be so down, especially since she's juggling a ton of stuff as a manager. First, she's got to sort out the uniform, plus the marketing and motivation for the team. She's even seen managers making lemonade for their players, so getting distracted isn't an option. Meanwhile, Bonnie's friend asks if she got closer to Jewelry after falling. Then Bonnie says that even though she's tough to approach, she's super cute. About their night, the girl spills all the gaming fun. They had the cyber cafe. That was her first time playing, and it was a blast. So, even though she wanted to keep showering compliments, she decided to chill there. At the house of the pro players, two members are scratching their heads over the team strategy. Minho stays quiet, and no matter what, Nam insists it still isn't enough. Both Sarah and another dude who seems to be a manager look a bit worried. The girl mentions that her pick will be a solid damage dealer. But Nam says mistakes won't fly because they're not looking for a player to train, but one who's already ready. Even though he was ranked first, Jay stuck to his guns and said no. Both Yuji and Eugene had never seen Jay act like this before. And the same goes for the managers who thought they should chat later. So before anything else, they switched the convo and hunting for snacks. Eugene asks why it's only them who have to go, but they manage to roll with it without arguing. Finally, after the two bounce, the manager thinks hard and calls Jay for a serious chat. Nam keeps thinking the new member needs to be top tier. Then the girl asks to give the guy a shot since he's more than qualified, saying the Reaper isn't the only good DPS. The male manager cuts in saying he heard a rumor about a debut competition in China next month. So naturally, Nam starts to freak out while Minho stays super serious. Bonnie's sister warns that the news will probably drop the next day, but even though it's a big event, they can't join since it's only for Chinese teams. Still, the manager mentions that in Korea, they've been contacted by people from all over the globe. So, the girl asks if Jay knows what that means, and with a grin, he gets that something national is on the way. Exactly for that reason, they need to recruit a new player, and Nam realizes there's no time to stick strictly to his ideals. Therefore, he's cool with the manager doing whatever it takes, and Miho just keeps quiet about it. Later that day at school, Sua rolls up to Yumi with a grin that could light up a room, totally throwing her off, especially since he barged into her classroom and was snagging all the attention from her classmates. So, naturally, she gives him a solid stomp right in the shin. Once they're alone, she asks what the blonde wants, but Sua just says he's down to chat. He's curious about her thoughts as a legendary level player. So, Demi straight up says she's not there to complain. She's a solid healer and can't throw shade at Duyan. Plus, Benny gives a shout out to Spellboy, saying his movement lines are clutch for rotations, but she doesn't ignore his habit of ghosting the team sometimes. Honestly, the only one Benny's worried about is the blonde himself. He was supposed to be a damage dealer after all. Benny calls him out for having more deaths than kills, but instead of sticking to support, she suggests he dive into the tank class. Surprisingly, the blonde takes this with a smile. Yumi's left confused since you'd expect him to whine about the critique. So, she returns the honesty with a gentle pat and some words of encouragement. Switching gears, they both agree that Subwa's got a lot to learn, even being just a year younger. And about the managers, Yumi thinks they're doing a solid job. Even though she wasn't a fan of Jury at first, she came to see her worth, and Bonnie's the same. By some twist of fate, they're all in the same year, but Sua admits he still doesn't know Bonnie that well. Anyway, Benny says she's got a question about the protagonist's secret identity. She wants to know how Bonnie reacted when she found out. In her head, she bets Bonnie fainted, realizing her classmate is famous. After sharing her thoughts, she asks again, but the blonde seems to zone out. Benny presses the question, and Sua starts to sweat a bit until he finally spills the tea she's waiting for. After that, Chag, he's thinking solo, first convinced Bonnie doesn't care about the game. But then he remembers Benny praise her for her tactical eye. So, there's definitely something off if someone uninterested knows that much. Breathless, a desperate player screams into the void. But he doesn't stop running for a second because with all the healers gone, he needs to regroup with his team. At least that was the plan until he spots someone lurking, and it's Xander. The dude can sense something's off, but Xander pops up behind him way too fast. And as a healer, all he can do is scream before getting taken out in one hit. A second later, one of the fallen player's teammates shows up to face off with Xander. So, the player yells for his buddy to take him out. But even though he's determined, the assassin just does what he does best, leaving the two enemy players to duke it out after getting wrecked by just one guy. Snagging 2 easy kills makes Xander's day, and since he took out the main healer, this round is his, but only in his head, because suddenly a message pops up saying 4 allies have been eliminated. Sandra can't believe it since he just took down 2 enemies solo. But it's true because without communication and skill, having the numbers doesn't mean squat. So logging off, Xander's stress level skyrockets, and he's about to lose it. But when he hears some noise, he has to mute his mic ASAP. His mom popped in to say dinner's ready. So once she leaves, he turns his mic back on and curses out each of his teammates, which of course, makes them turn against him. One of the allies asks if that's how Xander talks to his mom with that mouth and tells him to show some respect. But Xander doubles down on his rants. And especially for the ally who wasted the ultimate, he tells him to never team up again. Xander claims his teammates are a bunch of subhumans with 0 brain cells. So feeling hurt, they tell him to hit the road and roast him for getting humiliated by Duyan at the Swag Cup. But Xander just fires back, telling each of them to shut it. In the end, the allies even thought about dropping the convo, which just made Nephilis even more annoyed. However, one in particular just peeped that behavior without saying a word. Then when they naturally lost, Sander tossed his mouse up in frustration. And to make matters worse, the buttons on the mouse popped out like a beetle's nose. Sometime later in a custom room, the player Seed hops in. Neophilis quickly mentions being in a bad mood, but she's not about to dwell on that. In fact, the girl gets straight to the point about how things are going, and he thinks for a second spills that he's got a super important interview the next day. For Seed, having an interview means he's already in the running. And even though he's not totally sure, Sander happily agrees that he might finally become a pro player. After all, when that happens, he can forget a bunch of bad stuff. Anyway, Sanders says with determination that he'll crush these obstacles. And even without saying it, Seed knows he will. After that custom match, a message pops up on the boy's phone, totally catching him off guard. Since there shouldn't be anyone hitting him up at this hour, he goes to check. But there's a nasty surprise because the manager in charge of interviews just canceled it without a word. On the flip side, Swabbot was also surprised, but for a totally different reason that made zero sense. However, instead of being bummed or annoyed, he was hyped to meet the expectations of a certain request. Elsewhere in the city, coming back from the market, Duyan asks his sister to hold the rest of the groceries, but she's not about to be a bother. Still, the protagonist insists she worked hard, but the girl shoots back that he studied hard, too. Then, the two share a chill moment together. Being real, the sister says studying isn't really in the family genes, but she's glad he's not being lazy. Anyway, the girl asked if he's really going to keep talking to himself in his room every night. And the protagonist explains that he often plays with his friends. He worries about being a nuisance, but now that she knows the reason, the sister doesn't mind. Even though he's not studying as much as he usually plays all night. Switching gears, the protagonist talks about thinking of upgrading the computer. So, the girl asks if there's any problem to fix, and he admits, a bit shy, that there isn't. But since Duyan doesn't usually ask her for stuff, the girl just asks how much it will cost, which obviously makes him super happy. Previously, Suwa had helped with his old case, plus 8 gigs of RAM and a borrowed graphics card. So, the protagonist asked for 500 for the rest of the computer parts. Clearly, the sister was not ready for that number, especially since Duyan must be cheap since he borrowed most of it. Right away, the girl starts thinking about the bills. So, Duan pulls back the request. However, since that wasn't what she meant, the sister assured him she helped when she got paid and gave him some cash to grab food with his friends. Switching topics, the sister talks about the hero's other friend, because he keeps helping giving away old stuff like the other day when he brought a monitor. Anyway, she remembers it all started because of a smart elect dude. And Duyan hits the nail on the head when he thinks she might be talking about Sander,